part of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley, and happy Labor Day weekend. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, an Alabama man is trying to get legislation passed to make state agencies follow the same safety standards that private employers have to follow under OSHA. Professor Blair LM Kelley talks to us about the black working class. Tryston talks about what is going on in Madison City. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. The line is not open, but as always, you can send us a text message and we might respond to it on the air. You can also send us a voicemail throughout the week and we might play it on the next episode. You can call or call during the week, leave a voicemail, or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We will be taking calls during overtime today, so if you want to call in and talk to us, particularly if you are a Teamster and you want to talk to us about the new tentative agreement or the new contract that has been ratified, today we are going to be talking in overtime to Sean Orr about what's next for Teamsters at UPS. So if you're a UPS Teamster and you want to talk to us, give your thoughts about the contract and what's next, then holler at us in overtime for sure. We're really interested in your thoughts. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, all at the Valley Labor Report. You can also bookmark our website, TVLR.fm. Last week, we released an original and exclusive to TVLR article about the first ever Starbucks strike in the state of Alabama, in Scottsboro, Alabama. We talked to multiple Starbucks workers and have their words in the piece, as well as community supporters. So I am proud of the piece. Check it out, tvlr.fm. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, folks. So if you think that what we're doing is valuable, it takes money to keep this thing afloat. So send us money, tvlr.fm/donate. You can make a one-time donation or set up a recurring auto-pay monthly donation of any amount, and any amount helps. You can also buy our merch at tvlr.fm/store. You can buy tickets to our live show now in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tomorrow. We are having our first live show at Shenanigans Comedy Theater with local working comedians, local union members, union-made beer, lots of good stuff. So buy your tickets there. $20 for general admission, $35 for VIP. That gets you in an hour early to talk to us and our guests. So tvlr.fm/store for that. And if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do this without our local union sponsors. It really means a lot, and you can reach out to me for more details on that.
Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out.
All right, so everybody knows that this weekend is Labor Day weekend. It's a very big deal. We are really excited to be to be having a 3-day weekend. Although, well, I mean, it's still really a 3-day weekend. But I am going to be hosting. I'm going to be hosting the Dale Jackson Show on Labor Day from 7 to 8 a.m., folks. So if you haven't gotten enough of us on the radio this morning or in overtime on overtime after the show is over on the radio, then tune in to WVNN 7 to 8 a.m. Monday morning. We're going to be talking about Labor Day and unions with conservative author, columnist, an editor, former editor at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, Sohrab Ahmari, about why he is a conservative who thinks that unions are good, conservatives need to support unions, and the government needs to put the force of the state behind the labor movement. So really excited for that conversation, 7 to 8 a.m. Monday morning on WVNN. And, you know, Adam, you had some comments about Labor Day that you wanted to say this morning too, right?
Oh, yeah. Happy Labor Day, y'all. I just wanted to say that, you know, we are not journalists. We are not media professionals. We're just some labor movement guys who want to help build the movement, grow the movement, and strengthen the movement. We hope that this project and this platform can do that. But we can always strive to do better and to keep learning and improving. I had a trusted comrade reach out this week with some constructive criticism, and I'm really glad he did. I needed to hear it, and it was good to come from him. You know, we got to be willing to have tough conversations and reflect and be open to feedback. And as much as I, don't care for necessarily appearing on the Dale Jackson Show, I respect Jacob for doing it and for being willing to have conversations with folks, you know, maybe outside of our normal our normal circle. Personally, I am just humbled and appreciative that there are folks out there listening to what we have to say, that there are folks out there who are interested in this program and what we discuss, and that there are folks out there who dig what we're doing, or at least what we're trying to do. We can't do it without y'all. We need your feedback. We need your engagement on social media and the apps. We need your donations if you can afford it. This is a collective working class project that is by and for the working class in the Tennessee Valley and beyond. You know, the bosses and the politicians have their own media. Everyday working class Alabamians deserve media too. And the labor movement needs media, and nowhere is it more needed than the South. We need to spread the word. We need to get the message out about the power of unions, the power of collective organization, the power of solidarity, the power of organizing with your coworkers and your community. We need to share the stories of labor struggles throughout the South. We need to share the benefits of trade unions and the pathway they provide for a better life. We need to share the facts about unions, why they're good for workers, and why we need a lot more workers in unions. We need to educate folks about their rights. We need to share the history of our labor movement, how we fought and struggled for every right and benefit working people have, and how we can learn from it for the fights and struggles ahead. We need to discuss the issues of the day from a working class perspective, not a partisan perspective. We need to hear from labor instead of management. You know, we're not always going to agree, and we're not always going to get it right. Our labor movement is very diverse, our working class is very diverse, and so no surprise that our audience spans a broad spectrum of perspectives. That's pretty cool, and we hope that we can facilitate dialogue. We need to be able to engage with one another in good faith and find common ground where we can, if it can help the people. We have to always ground ourselves in addition and multiplication, not subtraction and division. It takes all of us doing what we can so that we can all get what we need. So please help us get better. Please help us grow and get the message out to broader audiences, whether that's through upgrading our website or purchasing airtime on additional commercial radio throughout the region. We'd love to expand into new markets. We know we have fans in Birmingham, Mobile, Chattanooga, Anniston, and elsewhere. We'd love to pursue an Alabama labor history miniseries. We'd love to appear on other shows and collaborate with other projects. We've got a couple special projects already on the way, including special features of our friends at the Ironworkers and IUPAT. We'd love to expand live in-person outreach, and that includes even, showing up at your events, so definitely keep us posted on those. With your help, we can grow this project to further amplify the voices of the working class in the American South. So finally, I hope everyone has a great Labor Day weekend filled with fun, food, football, and fellowship. Personally, I am excited to watch my Southern Miss Golden Eagles play. I know plenty of folks are pumped to watch Bama and Auburn and Tennessee, Mississippi State. If you're an Ole Miss fan, I'd rather you just not tell me that so that I don't think any less of you. I know there's a big Labor Day celebration in Tuscumbia, which has been going on for a real long time. This is the 104th one. And to the south of here will be a big celebration at Tannehill State Park. Please let us know about the Labor Day festivities in your neck of the woods so you can give us some good ideas on what we can try in Huntsville next year. Hopefully you will take some time this Labor Day to reflect on sacrifices made by workers past and present and how we can all get more involved in organizing our working class. Whatever you do this weekend, I hope you enjoy it and come back ready to build the better Alabama that is not only possible, but necessary.
Absolutely. And just a really quick fun fact about the Tuscumbia Labor Day celebration, that is where Jimmy Carter announced his presidential campaign. So pretty wild that was so kind of politically and culturally relevant back then, that you had a presidential candidate announce it here in Alabama. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take our break. We're going to be right back talking to Professor Blair LM Kelley about her new book, The Roots, Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class.
Really looking forward to this.
Read it last week. I really liked it. Excited to talk to her about it. So stay tuned, folks. We're going to be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller, and we are the Valley Labor Report. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call or a text message. Lines are not open. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. So, Professor Blair LM Kelley is the author of a new book, Black Folk: The Roots of the Black Working Class. She is the Williamson Distinguished Professor of Southern Studies, Director of the Center for Study of the American South, and co-director of the Southern Futures Initiative at the University of North Carolina. Professor Kelley, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Really happy to have you on, and you now live in North Carolina, but after reading your book, I know that you grew up in the North, but clearly, you know, every title that you've got is like Southern this, American South that. You have a really deep interest in the Southern United States. Why is that?
It's where my family's from. It's where my roots are, and I've been in North Carolina since the 90s. So I know I'm not born here, but my mother was, and I have family here. And so I feel connected to it. And for me, the South is the region that tells us about the nation. It forecasts so much of what we have to deal with with the nation as a whole. And so it's not a region to abandon or to ignore. So.
Absolutely. Could not agree with you more there. And I really appreciate when I see academics and people who do research and study and try to tell the story of, you know, Southern folks and the working class here in the South, because in a lot of ways it really is overlooked. And so, you know, folks familiar with literature, particularly, you know, literature by and about Black folks, are going to immediately notice a similarity in title to W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk. And having read both, you know, I can see some similarities, but you actually take pains at the beginning of your book to point out some of the differences in your work and his. What would you say are some of the things that connect your work to that earlier piece, and what are the things that make it distinct?
You know, Du Bois is our greatest scholar activist in African American history. So I by no means am thinking that I have anything to do to compare myself to his amazing body of work that really is still setting the standard for so many of us. That said, when I thought of the title Black Folk, I didn't mean like Souls of Black Folk. I meant like Black folk, like how we address each other. Like, you know, Black folk always gonna do such and such, or man, I love Black folk. You know, that feeling of it. So for me, it never was. I forgot about Du Bois, really, honestly, until my editor was like, "Are you going to address the elephant in the room?" And I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "You in the introduction, we're going to have to talk about, that you titled your book after Du Bois." I was like, "I did." So, and it was funny. I went to Twitter and I said to my Twitter followers, I said, "When I say Black folk, what do you think of?" And all the Black followers said, "My grandmother, church, having to wear pantyhose on Sunday, food, da, 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 da." And all the white people were like, "Oh, Du Bois, his amazing work."
Wow. I did not realize that. I thought that there was like a conscious thing there, but that is fascinating.
It was like goofy and unconscious.
Well, no, I really like it. Folk is a word. I say that word a lot. I like it. I think it's a very good word. And so I appreciate the title, even outside of the reference. That is. So I learned
it's a great
something.
word. It's ungendered. We have very few ungendered words.
Right.
I hate when people put the X on folk because I'm like, it's already ungendered. Like it's already doing all that work. So you don't have to do anything extra.
Yeah, Southern folks already gave you a super great word. You ain't got to make it, So I totally.
It already transcends.
There you go. So the project of the book is, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me to be an attempt to demystify the Black working class and to correct some assumptions about it in two key ways. And one is attacking the notion that Black folk, today in some sense, but more than that in the past, and particularly under slavery and Jim Crow, that Black folk did unskilled work. And and you go, to great lengths in the book to show that actually no, there's quite a lot of skill in the things that Black folk did. And then in the second case, that there was a compliance and apathy that they had under the systems of slavery and Jim Crow, and that it was, the great, Yankee saviors kind of came and gave them all this, and they didn't do anything to fight back against their oppression and the evil that was done to them under slavery and Jim Crow and since. Talk to us about those the project of your book.
So for me, those two things are essential and central to what I'm arguing. I'm always insulted when people say unskilled labor or menial labor, because I would like to see those folks who are designating and defining labor go do that work, and see how well they would do. Every job takes a skill set and a body of knowledge and a set of practices, and people become very skilled at them over time in doing that work. And so when I looked at my laundresses or my sharecroppers or postal workers or maids, they had a set of skills and they had to know how to do it quickly, efficiently, well, in some cases quite perfectly in order to survive. And so I was looking at the reels of farm workers during the pandemic that the United Farm Workers would put out.
I was just about to mention that.
People bundling radishes or cutting asparagus or leaning off trucks and holding their bodies in the air as they cut and wrap and package things the way we see them in the supermarket in one fell swoop. And I who's saying unskilled, and why are we saying that? And that seemed to be a vestige of another time where we had this sort of hierarchical race-based set of notions that I think don't serve us well anymore. And so I blew them up in this book, and hopefully people won't say that anymore.
Right, there you go. Yeah, the phrase is done now, I think. I don't think we're going to be seeing it anymore after this book, and I'm really happy about that. But that is fascinating that you thought of the United Farm Workers, because that is, I was thinking about those exactly, that Twitter account exactly, because there is really, I don't think, in the modern day, another piece of media that I have seen that more aptly attacks that notion of unskilled labor, because I would recommend people, if you don't follow the United Farm Workers, the union United Farm Workers on Twitter, follow it and go through their media tab, because they're constantly putting out videos that just will make your jaw drop if you're being honest about how skillfully they do the work. And then they'll also juxtapose that with oftentimes how little they're being paid for this work. And your jaw will drop again necessarily. And so the two of the standout professions that you mention in the book, trying to kind of attack the notion that they're unskilled, you referenced washerwomen and letter carriers. And both of those are really kind of thought of as unskilled, but especially washerwomen, women who wash clothes, right? You say that, and people are typically, they're not going to think of, oh, that's skilled labor, but it really was. Talk to us about what they had to do to succeed in their work.
So, the Black women who emerged from slavery, they had that skill of washing clothes, and it required a lot of knowledge, wisdom about how to create tools, how to make soap, a lot of things that we call, artisanal soap, and they were doing that. Right. Prior to the advent of any technology that we take advantage of to wash our clothes or to mix anything or make anything, they were recycling materials in order to bring to their yards, to burn for fire, to use for pots, using different things to squeeze water out of things, then pressing with an iron. The reason we call it an iron is it used to be a piece of iron where you had to wrap a rag around the handle in order not to burn yourself, and heat it up in some coal and then not burn the clothing. You had to find that right temperature for the iron. Again, if we had to wash our clothes that way, most of us would just be like laying somewhere and crying, because we wouldn't have the skill set. And it was a skill set that was passed down over generations. And Black women really held a monopoly on that work, because in enslavement, they were the people who did that work. And they understood their power, as a question you asked me earlier that I didn't fully answer, referenced that in enslavement, they understood that they had something valuable that people would want, and they could set the terms for their labor going forward in freedom. And they did. And so it's really amazing to see their consciousness that didn't have to be raised by some outside source. They didn't have to be educated about their role in society. They understood from the work itself and observing society who they were and what they could do and what they could fight for.
And not only do people think of, washerwomen is maybe unskilled, but when you think of, like you were alluding to, when you think of washerwomen, you don't think immediately of kind of a militant and organized working class. But actually, you talk about how washerwomen, in their creation as such, were some of the biggest forms of resistance that the Black working class did coming out of slavery.
Absolutely. I think the power of, their choice at the very beginning, the white customers wanted them to wash clothes at their own homes, so the clothes wouldn't go away and they could have control over their bodies, control over their time, and the control over the pace of their labor. And washerwomen collectively, individually, across the South, all tap into this idea that like, nah, we're going to do this at home. We're going to do it at our own homes. We're going to watch our own kids. We're going to take care of our own household tasks, and we'll do it at our pace. We'll come get it on a Saturday. We'll bring it back to you on Friday. Congratulations. This is what you're going to get. And I think it's so powerful that the decisions about how this work would be done was made by Black women. In the very first moments of freedom, and Jackson, Mississippi, there's a group of women who organized a union in 1866. I mean, if that doesn't teach you everything you need to know about how workers can think for themselves, I don't know what would.
Absolutely. I found that so cool that, they that was the first thing that so many black women did across the South. That's really, just amazing. And their resistance didn't stop there. And, you mentioned they formed unions, they went on strikes, and there were a couple of reasons why they had, so much power. And one of them was that there was real skill that was required at that time to be a washerwoman. And, I guess if you when I stopped and thought about it for a little bit, it made sense because like you said, like there's soap, you have to get the proportions right for these chemicals so that you're going to clean the shirt, but not deteriorate it or stain it or put a hole in it. You've got to have an iron, like a literal iron that you heat with a fire, and you have to get it to a perfect temperature so that again it doesn't burn a hole in the garments. So there's real skill there. But additionally, there was a social stigma around being a washerwoman, and there was an anecdote that you told about a former slaveholding man that really illustrated that stigma. Can you tell us that?
Yeah, that story is crazy. When I found it, I was like, okay, sir. So there was a man who had a plantation, had a full complement of hundreds of people who all walked away at the end of during the Civil War, and he was struggling to take care of his family. He was older, and he had 2 daughters. And he was like, well, no, I gotta try to wash these clothes myself because I can't degrade my 2 daughters by having them be seen outside washing their own clothes and washing our household clothes. It will destroy the family. So it's better for me to go out there and try and figure out how to do it. And that's when I was like, wow, there really is, the racialization of labor was really, that was deep. That was really deep, that to see white women doing their own laundry. And there's a beautiful book by a historian named Tara Hunter called To Join My Freedom, which I've loved for a long time, and I keep recommending it. I will say her name rhythmically. She points out that the poorest white women would save their pennies to get a washerwoman because it just it dented their stature in the community to have those clotheslines and pots in their own yard because it was thought of as black women's work.
Right, and that was such a bizarre kind of idea that it was so racialized as that even the poorest would try to farm this work out. And over the course as the years went on, like you mentioned and like in your book, they went on strikes, they withheld their labor, and so there were some attempts to try to get poor white women to take up this work. And you mentioned one op-ed that the guy had to basically apologize for suggesting that white women should also do this work.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, well, we could call it something different and they could maybe work in a factory and maybe they could do, he was really trying to build up this infrastructure that would make it slightly okay. And nothing like that ever happened anywhere in the country. 65% of all laundry washed at one point is washed by Black women in this country. And Black women were, less than 20% of the population of working women.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I listened to an interview that you recently did on KQED, and you mentioned there that for the proportion of Black women washing clothes to be 65%, in some areas, it almost certainly had to be 100%. It was 100%. Right, absolutely. Because you've got areas of the country where there are basically no Black people,
Yes, and the people who were probably washing the other laundry were probably Chinese Americans.
Right.
And not white Americans either.
Right. Yeah. So the washerwomen are really a great example of both of the things that you try to do in your book, are both of those kind of central items, the showing that there's skill, and then also there's a resistance there. The other one that I wanted to talk about was the letter carriers. And, so I'm a unionist, I'm a union member, I'm an officer on my labor council, and I have a union radio show. So I know about the postal strike of the 1970s. But I did not know about the organizing and the all-black union of postal workers that came before it, and that you argue was really central to the postal strike in the 70s actually happening. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So for Black folks, postal work is work in protest, is work in resistance. It's the only working class set of labor delineated in the Constitution. And so it was esteemed. It's part of our citizenship. It's part of our outlook as a nation. And yet the nation passed laws banning Black men and women from participating in it. Only after the Civil War do you have any numbers of Black men who will begin to work in the Postal Service, and then Black women. And it is a fight the entire time. There are communities in the South that don't hire their first Black postal letter carriers until the 1950s and 60s. And that federal employment was so important. And so the change happened because Black workers who did gain access immediately began to join unions and organize and fight. And their outlook was essential to making space for Black people to join, fight for their space in the Postal Service. And what's interesting to me about Black unionists is consistently throughout history, they're not just concerned about their own rights in their own sort of realm of organizing. They're civil rights activists. And they are always thinking more broadly and about more coalition. And so it makes sense that the leadership of Black postal workers and the tradition of the leadership of Black postal workers in a unionized space leads to that strike in the 1970s that's so impactful on the entire nation. And there's a wonderful postal historian, Philip Rubio, who I want to shout out here, who's also a union postal worker and turned historian, whose work I am really thankful for in illuminating this larger history.
And the Pullman porters are similar to the postal workers in that they are that is a career that's open to Black working folks fairly early on, that pays better, that allows them to be a little bit more educated and allows them to be well traveled. And I found your section of the book about the Pullman porters to be a really I thought a helpful correction in some of my own imagination about the Pullman company, because when I hear Pullman, I think of Eugene Debs, right?
Yes, exactly, and the strikes and stuff. Yes, absolutely.
But
good to know that he was awful to white workers too.
Right. Yes, yeah. It was the
equal
the guy was just
awfulness.
terrible.
Yes.
But in many ways, the Black Pullman unions, the Pullman porters, were really more consequential to the history of the company and the trajectory of the company than even the white conductors, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. The Pullman porters, George Mortimer Pullman, wanted this all Black male force because he thought it would remind people of the antebellum South and being swept away in luxury and having a Black manservant waiting on you. He incidentally made this all Black male more educated, more well-traveled, more versed in the world, Black male working force, and Black women as well. There were some Pullman maids, and they organized. They had to fight really hard. The Pullman Company did so much to suppress the union in every way it could, with spies and trickery and blank checks given to leaders and all kinds of things, and firing folks. But they persevered over decades of trying. It's really a 10-year period where A. Philip Randolph takes the helm. He's not a Pullman porter himself. His brother had been one at one point, and they need someone from the outside to help to give them some strength so that not everyone can be fired. And they eventually, after a 10-year period, organized, but then they build the civil rights movement. Then they Create the infrastructure that leads to the March on Washington that we know about in the 1960s. They push FDR to dissemble segregation in federal employment. They do so many different kinds of things that go beyond just their own needs for wages and decent hours.
And just to go back quickly to the postal carriers, to illustrate the other point about the, attacking the notion of unskilled labor, the president of the United States tried to break that strike with the National Guard and was not able to.
Absolutely. That unity that we're talking about, it created an argument that society as a whole understood, that folks didn't want to support this, and the folks that they tried to bring in as scabs from the military couldn't do the work. They couldn't efficiently deliver the mail because it's skilled labor.
Right.
And so it was an amazing moment in our history as a country for bringing together so many of the things that we need to remember now. And we need to focus on now in terms of the strength of labor and the importance of it, and honoring it and treating people with respect. And
absolutely. So the book is really great. We're talking to Professor Blair LM Kelley. I really enjoyed it. The title is Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class. And, you know that we're a union talk radio program, and we are on the radio in Alabama. And so why do you think this book is, what in particular do you think this book has to say to Southerners and Alabamians and unionists here in the South?
I think what's really powerful for me is twofold. I use my personal family stories, the stories that were passed down to me about their lives as Southerners, as migrants, as people who were looking for a fair treatment. And I draw on their wisdom and their knowledge of the world and their everyday stories. No one in my family was a famous organizer. No one in my family was a famous civil rights veteran. They were all everyday working people. And yet, to look at the lives of everyday working people from the South is to look at wisdom and to look at a collective knowledge and to look at strength. And when we want to figure out good models for how we can go forward as a country, how we can think about what's possible in the future, they provided those good models. And the everyday people in my family, the everyday people in other people's families, are whose voices I wanted to glean strength from to write this book. And so we have a lot to learn from everyday working people. And I hope the country is finally starting to wake up to that.
And, that's a really great place to kind of wrap it up on, because this is really an interesting time for working folks in the United States, because there appears to be a resurgence in militancy among workers. There's a resurgence in interest in labor organizing. A new poll that the AFL-CIO commissioned last week just came out that said 88% of people under the age of 30 have a positive view of unions. That is astronomical.
That's great.
I mean, you can't get 9 out of 10 people to agree on just about
anything. No.
And so, we have these high-profile labor struggles: the UPS Teamsters, the UAW, the Starbucks stuff that's going on, the actors and the writers on strike. Who, if you think of working people that may be more and less sympathetic, the actors and writers are going to be at the least sympathetic end, just because of how people conceptualize of Hollywood. Not because they're less deserving, of course, because, but people they think Hollywood and they think
it's fancy.
Exactly. And so, but even in that context, that poll said that something like 70% of Americans were on the side of the actors and the writers. And this is all, but it is amid a context of 50 years of neoliberal economics, and that in many ways has returned us to the Gilded Age. And so, what do you make of the current moment for the working class generally, and the black working class specifically, and how the history that you've traced to this point is important in understanding the current moment, as well as, our potential futures?
I think the pandemic called the question. I think we were kind of sleepy and doing a lot of work, and nobody was really thinking about how any of us were orienting our lives or sacrificing too much. And then the pandemic hit, and we created something that we called essential workers for the first time. We're like, who's that? And those folks had to keep working, and they had to keep plugging away, and they died at higher rates than everyone else. And they happened to have been more Black, more brown, more Native than everyone in the country, and more working class than everyone else in the country, because they didn't have the luxury of staying home and, staying safe. And so as we came out of that crisis moment, I think a lot of people reflected. We had the Great Resignation. We had all these moments where people were like, oh no, we can't get people to work. And then it was interesting to me that, people weren't saying, oh, so we need to pay more. And so we need to give better benefits. We need to give them insurance, fun things like that. And so the market shifted, right? But it shifted in a way that enabled workers to really say, hey, we deserve a bigger piece of what we produce as labor. And people finally understood. I think that those high numbers in those polls are indicative of this moment. And something that if you probably asked 10 years ago, people wouldn't have agreed. But now people understand, when folks started dying at their jobs, that serving others and providing important resources in our hospitals, in our schools, in our, all these different kinds of spaces, we all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is needed, this is essential, this is skilled, this is valuable, and how do we do better than we've been doing? And so unions can really step into that space and break out of the bad rap that conservatives have given unions for generations. I'm a union baby myself, and I, my mother always taught me the value of each and every little thing that she had because she was a union member. And so I think that we can begin to teach those little things that, will make life more fair, more decent, that can come from union work. And for me, Black folk is a reminder that the union work has to be collective. It has to be broad in its scope. It cannot be just about just us. We need to just improve us. It really has to say workers, people who work, people who labor deserve more, that we all need to advocate for one another really broadly. And so that's something I've been encouraged to see in the organizing and the lesson that Black workers and Black folk can give us about the power of thinking broadly about what we deserve.
Professor Blair LM Kelley. The book is Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class. Really enjoyed the conversation. Recommend folks get the book. Appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with Tryston Gilbert. Tryston is our resident Madison City Council watcher. He's going to tell us, it's been a couple of months since we've had him on, so when we get back from the break, he's going to talk to us about what's been going on at the Madison City Council. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can send us a text message. Phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Appreciate everybody that's been hanging out with us in the chat. We got a $2 super chat from Strom from South Carolina. Thank you, Solidarity from South Carolina. Also says, I may have to fly to Huntsville for the live show, folks. So if you don't want your ticket to go to Strom, you're going to need to go ahead and get that because there are only 40 tickets total. So you're going to want to go ahead and get one of those. Appreciate folks in the chat. Infinite Content. Will. Vonda. Vonda was our guest on Shop Talk last week, where she talked to Adam about what labor councils are, why they're important, and how to be good at being one. So that was a really good episode of Shop Talk. We appreciate her coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Sid Nanda, Pittsburgh Dude 87, Michael, Jose, Alex, 45, Huntsville Dim Worker. Lots of folks hanging out with us in the chat. We really appreciate it. So let us go ahead and talk to Tryston Gilbert about what is going on in Madison City. Tryston regularly, he always watches the Madison City Council meetings so that You don't have to. It's been 2 months since we last spoke to you, Tryston. Welcome back to the show, and what's been going on in Madison City?
Good morning, Jacob. Can you hear me?
I can.
Right on. Okay, so Madison has been a bit quieter since the entire special election calmed down back in May. Of course, they voted not to adopt a city manager form of government. But there are a couple trends going on, and I'll tell you about them. So the first thing that I've noticed every meeting, the council has a lot of contracts, a lot of money going into recreation. Of course, there's the new Trash Panda Stadium, the Toyota field off of the highway there. This past month, one of the people that manages those parks was talking about buying 2 ThorGuard lightning detection systems for the parks. It sounds really cool, but they're these advanced warning storm systems I think would be better than having a 16-year-old umpire trying to shuffle people off the field when there's a storm coming in. And there was one particularly passionate commenter, I think I sent you a clip of, who wanted to see more courts of a specific kind in the area. Do you have that clip?
Yeah, let's go ahead and play that, Adam.
What's the number one sport in America today? What's the fastest growing sport in America today? Pickleball. If you don't support pickleball, you're behind the times. My wife and I play in tournaments in Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. We've been to all kinds of rec facilities. Why don't we have them in Madison? I know we're building one south of 565, but that was promised, announced last year, but have we broken ground? Is it going to be this year? What's the delay? Last year, it's estimated 23 million people played tennis. You know how many people play pickleball? 36 million. That's 13 million more people. Very few people play tennis anymore. Go out to Dublin Park, which I am every night, by the way. Pardon me, I'm late for playing tonight.
I got to say, I love the passion for pickleball.
Yeah, I mean, this guy is the real deal.
If only he could advocate for like Medicaid expansion that hard as he does for pickleball, man. Like,
you almost have to wonder if like the Pickleball Association is feeding this guy lines and money.
How dare you suggest he is on the take from the big pickleball?
Well, I didn't see any sponsored jersey, but the man did show up in athletic wear to the city council meeting. He said he was going to a match right after that. So,
where is he going to a match? I thought there weren't any pickleball.
Clearly.
Well, he said he was having to travel out to Athens, Decatur, some other place I forget. But you know, I used to play tennis, so I was listening to him a little closely. But maybe I should try pickleball. It sounds like the bee's knees.
Yeah. Well, you're behind the times, clearly, since you're not.
Yeah.
So you are. You
are. Who isn't in some way or another?
Right. There you go.
All right. The following week, second meeting in July, the thing that caught my eye, so talking about the Toyota Stadium again, the city's currently building more on-ramps over there for town Madison. If you've driven past there, you know it's kind of awkward to exit if you're going west. You have to get off on Zert and go in that way. So they're trying to build more high-speed ramps in. But during the construction of one of these ramps, they didn't strike gold. They struck old acetylene tanks. There's some pictures I sent, and I can describe them for people who are just listening if you have those. But while digging and groundbreaking for some of these ramps, they found they said about 2,500 old acetylene tanks, and these were rusted out steel tanks that were lined with asbestos. And they're just laying there in a pit. It looks like it was 20 feet deep or so. They excavated these with a backhoe, and AlDOT is paying to get them sent away and disposed of properly. But a contact of mine, a friend of mine, asked his dad about it because I was telling him about it. And his dad remembered a welding shop being there something like 30 years ago. So, and that shop is long since gone. I haven't been able to find anything about it. I'd be interested to hear if anybody does know more, but it sounds like somebody probably knew a friend with a backhoe, didn't want to pay for the proper like EPA way to get rid of these asbestos laden tanks. And so just dug a doggone big hole and buried them in there and hope nobody would ever find it. And for 30 years, it seems like they were right. Who knows if they're even still around?
Wow. Jeez. Yeah,
That's
and
pretty wild.
we've got pictures of those. Adam, can you show those on the screen for the people that are and for the people that are listening? It's just as Tryston described.
Yeah, if I can actually find those pictures, I'm sorry.
They're right under the cliffs.
Oh yeah, I see it. Actually, I do see it.
What's the number one sport in
sorry,
America
that's our
today?
pickleball
What's
guy.
the
We don't want to
fastest
have
growing
him
sport?
again. Yeah, here we go. Oh my gosh, that's wild.
Pile, yeah. And that first picture, you could see where one was propped open, all that, all the white material. And they need that with acetylene to keep the gas from decomposing, because I believe it has an organic component. Yeah, it's just wild. To me, it's sort of a very visceral piece of town history. It's almost like digging up bones, right? Like what happened? How do we construct a story about this?
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I hope it gets like properly disposed this time, like for real. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think they're being sent to like an environmental hazard disposal facility in another state. I forget exactly where. Sorry. Last thing I want to talk about is a little less fun than the other two. One of the meetings this month in August, there was an example of what I'm calling the Floridification of education. There was a apparently concerned parent who brought in a book to the council and read a passage from it, and he was very emotional. He was claiming that this book was not an appropriate one to have for children to have access to. And the scene was fairly disturbing. It was an instance of child abuse in the book coming from a guardian. However, I did a little digging and found the book he was talking about is The Watsons Go to Birmingham /1963. It's a historical fiction novel that takes place during the civil rights movement. And I wasn't really surprised to find that. I've on all the stories that I've been seeing, the people who are most verbally and outwardly concerned about inappropriate material seem pretty prone to target books that are historical or from a perspective their children might not belong to. This was a white father who didn't really give any of this context in his book, or in his speech. But the book is about a black family who is moving from one city to another during this troublesome time. And the scene in question is the troubled child has been playing with matches. The grandmother is trying to teach him a lesson to get him to quit, and she makes some decisions which she later comes to regret. But of course, none of that context made it into his speech. He just found the most visceral parts of it to try and get a reaction.
Right.
Yeah, and so presumably the book is not condoning this behavior.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I remember, and he said his child was in 4th grade, I think. And I remember when I was in middle school around 6th grade, we were all encouraged to read a book called Daniel's Story, which was a very disturbing sort of a historical fiction account of a Holocaust victim that really detailed like the ghettos and the camps and just the loss of loved ones that they experienced during that. And yes, it was one of the most graphic and disturbing things I had read at that age, but I think I learned like valuable lessons from it, and we were able to process it as a group and talk about it. So I don't think that I think that all this talk of material being inappropriate is a screen for another motive, and I don't really trust it when I hear it. That's my take anyway.
Well, especially regarding stuff like that, where, graphic depictions of situations that are not good, but not being condoned, I wonder how much of the Bible people like that have read, because
I thought about that too. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, was there anything else that you had for us this week?
Not in my notes. If you have any questions about what's going on, I'll see what I can dredge up real quick. Otherwise, I'll talk to you guys later.
I don't think so. Adam, do you?
No, I really appreciate it, Tryston, and keep us posted on the possible book banners. Hopefully they don't gain any traction here or anywhere.
Sure, I'll try and look up some Board of Education meetings they might have also been targeting. That'll be hard to watch, but I'll try and bring it to you. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Thanks for your service, Tryston.
Thanks, Tryston.
Yeah, all right. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good one.
All right, you too. We've got another couple of segments we want to make sure that we get to this week. First up, last week in Southern labor. Every week, workers in the South are on the move, doing things, fighting for their rights, and winning and losing. Lots of stuff happening. So here's what Southern U.S. workers were up to from August 18th to the 25th. In new election filings, 36 workers at the North Carolina Association of Educators in Raleigh, North Carolina, filed for a union election with the North Carolina Staff Organization, and then, did you see this, Adam, withdrew their petition in the same week?
Yeah, I tried to do some digging about that. I've asked around. I'm waiting for some information about it. I assumed that this was a merger of a professional staff union and an associate staff union, right, and merging into one wall-to-wall union, but to be continued.
22 workers at Statesville Painting and Maintenance in Danville, Virginia, filed for a union election with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 53. 82 workers at Quest Diagnostics Incorporated in Tucker, Georgia, filed for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 728. 32 workers at Ray Magnet Wire Company in Ashland, Virginia, filed for a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 666. 200 workers at Lockheed Martin Bluegrass Station in Lexington, Kentucky, filed for a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. And 60 workers at Smart Simple Solutions in Leesburg, Virginia, filed for a union election with the Iron Workers International Union. We had a few withdrawals last week. Restaurant Associates in McLean, Virginia, Jones Lang LaSalle workers in Jacksonville, Florida, and Ardent Mills workers in Sherman, Texas all withdrew their petition for a union election. We had a few results. 65 workers at Santa Preen Production, Pensacola in Cantonment, Florida, voted against unionization with the IBEW Local 773, 26 to 34. 11 workers at NeuroTor Physical Therapy in Marietta, Georgia, voted in favor of unionization with the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, 7 to 4. IATSE said in a statement that this will be the first time ever the union will be negotiating a contract with touring physical therapists.
Way to go, IATSE.
2,500 PhD students at Duke University voted in favor of unionization with the Duke Graduate Student Union 1,000 to 131. I believe this is the first ever certified graduate student union in the South. Duke is a private university, so is under the National Labor Relations Act. In strikes and bargaining updates, we've got a lot. The WGA and SAG-AFTRA continue their strike against the media companies, and 5 late-night hosts started a podcast, presumably to cure their boredom, but also to raise money for their striking employees. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon, and John Oliver have started the new podcast, Strike Force 5. You can listen to it on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. All the money made will go to the employees of those 5 late-night hosts. Workers at Starbucks in Scottsboro went on the first ever strike at the company in the state of Alabama, citing inconsistent scheduling, a refusal to make repairs that led to trip and fall hazards, and a refusal to bargain. You can read more about that on TVLR.fm. United Campus Workers, CWA Local 3865, announced last week that after a 6-month campaign by the union, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville announced major increases to minimum stipends for graduate assistants across the university. Graduate stipends for 9-month and 12-month contracts will immediately rise from $19,401 and $25,868 per year, respectively, which represents a 35% and 44% raise from the previous minimum stipends of $14,400 and $18,000, respectively, for 9-month and 12-month contracts. Workers at a Dunkin' Donuts in Atlanta, organizing with the Union of Southern Service Workers, went on strike for raises, better hours, vacation time, and benefits. UAW President Shawn Fain highlighted how far apart the union and Ford is in their bargaining, with Ford coming to the table asking for concessions. GM and Stellantis have yet to offer a counterproposal. The union filed a unfair labor practice for refusal to bargain against GM and Stellantis. And 500 auto workers with the UAW Local 863 in Louisville, Kentucky, held practice pickets last week. We're going to have more about the UAW negotiations and overtime. CWA members at Maximus, the call center workers that help Americans navigate the ACA marketplace and Medicare, including workers from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, took part in the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington to demand more paths for advancement, higher pay, and more breaks. The company has laid off hundreds of employees this year, the CWA alleges, in retaliation for union organizing. In politics and legislation, friend of the show, Warren Tidwell, was appointed to the Governor's Resilience Council for the state of Alabama. We're really excited about his voice being on the council. The council will work with local, state, federal, and private partners to help communities build stronger, live safer, and recover quicker. The work of the council will be aimed at better preparing Alabama's communities to withstand events that result in harmful societal impacts. You'll remember that Warren Tidwell was a former employee of Hometown Action before starting his own nonprofit organization in Camp Hill, Alabama, to aid in long-term recovery efforts after a particularly bad hailstorm that left, if I remember correctly, something like 80% of the roofs in that area destroyed. Very bad stuff, but great to have his voice on the council.
Absolutely.
The Department of Labor announced last week that it is moving to expand overtime protections to an estimated 3.6 million more workers. The rule would restore and extend overtime protections to low-paid salaried workers by raising the salary cap from $35,568 to $55,000 a year. That is a huge increase. It will also better identify which employees are executive, administrative, or professional employees who should be overtime exempt. The rule would automatically update the salary threshold every 3 years to reflect current earnings data and restore overtime protections for U.S. territories. From 2004 until 2019, the department's regulation ensured that for U.S. territories where the federal minimum wage was applicable, so too was the overtime salary threshold. The department's proposed rule would return to that practice and ensure that workers in U.S. territories subject to the federal minimum wage have the same overtime protections as other U.S. workers. The Texas law forbidding municipalities from enacting worker protections above what the state sets was declared unconstitutional by a Texas judge, but the ruling has been appealed and waits a final decision. The Treasury Department released a new study about unions, and the findings are they are good, folks. Specifically, it found unions raise the wages of their members between 10 and 15%. Unions also improve fringe benefits and workplace procedures such as retirement plans, workplace grievance policies, and predictable scheduling. Unionization also has spillover effects that extend well beyond union workers. Competition means workers at non-unionized firms see increased wages too. Heightened workplace safety norms can pull up whole industries. Union members improve their communities through heightened civic engagement. They are more likely to vote, donate to charity, and participate in a neighborhood project. And the higher pay and job security of both union and non-union middle-class workers can further spill over to their families and communities through more stable housing, more investment in education, and other channels. Unions can boost businesses' productivity as well by improving working conditions and by giving experienced workers more of an input into decisions that design better and more cost-effective workplace procedures. Very cool report from the U.S. Department of Treasury. Here's another announcement from the U.S. Department of Labor. They announced last week that they will award more than $3 million to the state of Georgia to help identify and address barriers workers face when accessing state unemployment insurance benefits. The grant will be administered by the Department's Employment and Training Administration and support Georgia's efforts to remove barriers related to race, age, ethnicity, language proficiency, disability status, geographic location, or other issues that make it hard for people to access unemployment insurance benefits. Funding is provided by the American Rescue Plan.
We need that in Alabama.
Yep. In internal union affairs, AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler and Secretary-Treasurer Fred Redmond delivered an inaugural State of the Union's address last week, where they released new polling which underscores the American people's support of unions, especially that of young workers, those of which that are under 30 support unions at approximately 90%. As well as Americans' view of unions as critical, as well as Liz Shuler's and Fred Redmond's view of unions as critical to growing the middle class and providing opportunities for working people to thrive. Additionally, both officers stressed that with this unprecedented level of support, working people in unions are prepared to organize like never before, hold big corporations accountable, and restore America's promise for all. A rural carrier for the U.S. Postal Service is seeking to decertify the National Rural Letter Carrier Association as the union representing rural carriers over what he says is the union failing to present them well, in particular with respect to the Postal Service's new policy that will cut the pay of 2/3 of rural carriers. The campaign is being led by a fellow who says he is a 15 member of the union and was a steward for a year before resigning. He is also saying that he is working with the Teamsters, while the Teamsters say they are not working with him.
Interesting.
The UAW turned 88 years old last week. The unions and labor groups sent a letter to the Hyundai CEO pushing for Hyundai and its subsidiaries to hire locally, train workers from the communities around the plants, bolster safety standards, and protect the environment around the plants, which are expected to employ more than 30,000 Georgians and Alabamians. The coalition is seeking a binding agreement modeled on one reached last year with the electric bus maker New Flyer, which promised, among other things, that at least 45% of new hires and 20% of promotions would be women, minorities, and U.S. military veterans.
Also, very important there is card check neutrality as part of that community benefits agreement.
Steve Stutz, former international representative for the International Union of Operating Engineers, the local's business manager, and a current board member of the Muscle Shoals Democrats, said last week that it has been 29 years since he was first appointed to the international staff. He shared a newspaper clipping on Facebook where it was reported on in 1994, and I found that fascinating. The idea that we would have a press that cares enough about working people to report on a local union member being appointed to international staff. Not totally sure that we would see something similar today. If we missed something, please let us know. TVLR.fm/contacts, and we will include it in next week's update. Finally, the last segment we're going to hit today is Boss Watch. Every week, bosses are breaking the law and injuring their employees. So these are the illegal activities of Southern bosses for the week ending on September the 1st. Starting in Alabama, this is a fascinating story. Last year, in the summer of 2022, Brett Savage, a 36-year-old communications technician with the Alabama Forestry Commission and a resident of Deatsville in Elmore County, was killed instantly when the communications tower he was helping a crew remove unexpectedly fell on top of him in Washington County. Savage had only worked for the agency for 3 months, and he left behind his wife and 5 children. Last week, an unlikely outlet highlighted the story of his family trying to get accountability. That outlet was 1819 News. And the article was, it was really genuinely good. Like, actually really good. An article that you would, if I had read that in a real news outlet, I would have believed it, that it was a real news outlet doing this. But, credit where it's due. So here's what 1819 News reported. Dusty Savage, Brett Savage's older brother, said the family has not been given a lot of details about what happened, and they want to know how this kind of incident will be prevented in the future. They also want the public to know that the loss they have suffered. 1819 said that the family reports having contacted several agencies and people involved, but they say nobody is taking responsibility. Savage also claims that his brother did not have any kind of training to do that kind of work. And that makes sense. He'd only been on the job for 3 months. Because the Occupational Safety and Health Act exempts state and municipal governments, and because Alabama, unlike many states, does not have our own version of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which is a specialized body focused on safety and health, they could not investigate the incident. Instead, the local sheriff's office supposedly investigated and told the wife that her husband's death was, quote, accidental. Here's a quote from 1819 News that they had from the brother. I think they should be held accountable because, honestly, anybody else in Alabama would be in jail. If you were out there with no certifications doing that and somebody got killed, the people responsible would be in jail. I'm not trying to get anybody put in jail, but this doesn't need to happen to other people, and they shouldn't be exempt from an OSHA investigation just because they're a state agency. We could not agree with him more on that, even though, unfortunately, the brother is wrong about the consequences that private employers would face for killing somebody, but at the very least, unlike state agencies, it wouldn't be nothing. So, kudos to 1819 News for reporting that, and best of luck to the brother.
Right, and we need to get that changed in Montgomery. Absolutely.
On coal miners, the U.S. Department of Labor announced last week that its Mine Safety and Health Administration completed impact inspections at 15 mines in 12 states in July of 2023, issuing 288 violations and 4 safeguard notices. Among the 288 violations that MSHA found in July, the agency evaluated 82 as significant and substantial, which are reasonably likely to cause reasonably serious injury or illness, and found 1 to have an unwarranted failure finding, which is an aggravated conduct that constitutes more than ordinary negligence. The agency completed inspections at mines in Alabama, Alaska, California, Colorado, Idaho, Iowa, Kentucky, New York, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and West Virginia. From July the 17th to the 18th in 2023, MSHA conducted an impact inspection at Buzzy Unicems USA's Lone Star Pryor Plant Mill and Quarry in Mays, Oklahoma. Selected given its previous enforcement history, so this mine has previous run-ins with the law, the mine's operator was cited for 53 violations again, after having already been cited for violations in the past. Among them, 25 were significant and substantial violations. Specifically, the agency found that Buzzy Unicem USA's violations included exposing miners to hazards related to energized electrical conductors, accumulated combustible materials, and improperly maintained firefighting equipment. The mine has been cited in the past for allowing exposed electrical conductors and for permitting waste or rags with flammable or combustible liquids to create a fire hazard. And failures to install and maintain guards, provide a safe means of access to work areas, store materials properly, identify chemicals in use with proper labels, and to maintain compressed air systems as required. MSHA had found that the mine operator allowing many of these conditions to exist before the July impact inspection. Earlier this year, the agency issued a hazard alert related to hazardous chemicals and continues to raise awareness about this issue. Heading over to Texas, Chris Begley, a UPS Teamster of 28 years with local 767 and father of 2, died after a sweltering shift 4 days after 4 days of trying to recover and 1 day in the hospital. The Teamsters said in a statement, last week the Teamsters ratified our national master agreement at UPS that includes air conditioning in new vehicles, retrofitting of existing vehicles with heat shields, fans, and cargo ventilation, and a new safety and health committee to enforce company violations. While these improvements will make a difference in the months and years ahead, we had to fight like hell avail to secure them. Chris Begley should still be alive to experience them. All companies, including UPS, need to remember that their past failings to protect workers can have deadly consequences in the future. OSHA told NBC News that it has opened investigations into more than 20 heat-related workplace fatalities in Texas this year alone. This came only days after a Texas law that eliminated municipalities' abilities to enforce water breaks through local ordinances went into effect. In Tennessee, unfortunately, Brother Begley was not the only Teamster to die from the heat last week. Tony Rufus, an 11-year Kroger distribution center worker in Memphis and member of Teamsters Local 667, also died from heat illness. They said that he went to produce to try to cool off after a long shift, and that's where he passed out and died in front of all of his coworkers. According to The Guardian, this comes after the union had asked the company to allow more breaks and cooler working conditions to no avail. After his death, members of Local 667 are asking that management sit down with them to work out new heat protections to prevent this from happening again. But Kroger has not made any commitments to bargain in good faith over changes, much less committed to any concrete changes themselves. We had several dishonorable mentions. A FedEx customer in Oklahoma said she saw her delivery person collapse in her yard. The customer and their neighbors brought the driver ice packs to help him cool down, offered to call 911, but the driver called the boss instead, who then began to yell at the driver, chiding him for not having drank more Gatorade and to get back to work after 30 minutes of rest. The neighbors urged the driver to call 911 after no improvement, but he called his boss instead again, who again yelled at him and told him not to call an ambulance. Fortunately, the neighbors called an ambulance and the driver got medical attention. 2 federal investigators have recovered $540,000 in wages for 268 H-2A workers from a father and son then operating as North Carolina farm labor contractors, whose violations of federal laws included failing to pay some workers their full wages, to provide safe and adequate housing, and to reimburse workers transportation costs. U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division investigators found Patel Shippers, LLC, which provides fruits and vegetables from India and Asia to grocery stores in 10 states, including Florida, denied 25 workers overtime wages by paying them straight time rates for all hours worked, including for hours over 40 in a work week. The employer also failed to pay 3 workers at least the federal minimum wage by not keeping an accurate record of hours worked. The Department of Labor recovered $71,000 in back wages and damages. The U.S. Department of Labor has cited Houston, Texas area engine component manufacturer Air Starter Components again for failing to correct safety hazards that caused an employee's finger amputation in March of 2022. OSHA proposed $127,000 in penalties after its follow-up inspection and $171,000 in penalties for failing to remedy the 2022 violations, for a total of $298,000 in proposed penalties. 1 person is dead and 2 are injured after a workplace accident at Warrior Met Coal last week. The Mine Safety and Health Administration and the union, the United Mine Workers of America, are investigating. A Guntersville man died Thursday night at a workplace accident, according to authorities. Coleman County Coroner Jeremy Kilpatrick said that Michael Thompson, 38, died in the incident at Coleman Casting on County Road 490. The incident happened shortly after 10:30 p.m. The body has been sent to the Department of Forensic Sciences for an autopsy, and police are investigating. The Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Department of Justice announced that Japan-based Tadano Limited and its subsidiaries will pay a $40 million civil penalty and contribute an additional $3.2 million to reduce diesel emissions to resolve allegations that it violated Title II of the Clean Air Act. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, sued Southern, a high-cost installment lender, for illegal loan churning practices that harvested hundreds of millions of dollars in loan costs and fees. The CFPB alleges that the company identifies borrowers who are struggling to repay their existing loans and then aggressively pushes them to refinance. Borrowers become trapped in the loan churning scheme and often are forced to refinance multiple times. The CFPB is seeking to end Southern's unlawful loan churning practices to gain redress for harmed consumers and to require Southern to pay a civil money penalty. The Federal Reserve Board on Tuesday fined Regions approximately $2.95 million for unsafe and unsound practices in its flood insurance compliance program and for flood insurance regulatory violations. And that is going to be it for us today on the radio. If you want to continue watching the show, we are live online on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to be talking to Sean Orr, the co-chair of Teamsters for a Democratic Union and a Teamster, a UPS Teamster, talking about the new ratified contract at UPS and what happens next. So you don't want to miss that conversation. Otherwise, folks, we will see you next week. Okay, all right. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody tuning in and really looking forward to this conversation with Sean Orr. It's going to be great. Really looking forward to it. And appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat, continuing to participate in the conversation. We have 33 likes, but over 50 people are watching. So let's get those numbers up if we could. I think we can do better than that. So, Potato in the chat says, I want a UAW worker to call in. That would be cool. I agree. We should definitely get a UAW caller to call in. And we have scheduled next week for the main show Nick Livick from the UAW to talk about the contract negotiations. But of course, next week we are going to be super focusing on the UAW. And so hopefully we'll have a few UAW members call in. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We're going to be right back with Overtime, folks. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We are Alabama's only union talk radio show. And this is Overtime. Overtime is the second half of our program where we are online only, where we are free from the shackles of the FCC censors. And, yeah. Really great stuff. Looking forward to our conversation with Sean Orr, co-chair of Teamsters for a Democratic Union, about what's next for UPS Teamsters. We're going to take some calls after that. Looking forward to that as well. First up here in Overtime, Adam, you've got some cool news on Medicaid expansion. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, I'm always down to talk about Medicaid expansion. It's an issue I'm passionate about, and I've got some news to report. And so, you know, this is an issue that affects working class folks across Alabama. And first things up is from Cover Alabama Coalition. And I wanted to point out this new press release they put out this week. Medicaid expansion, a proven solution to help Alabamians join, stay in the workforce, according to a new report. So Medicaid expansion is a proven solution to help people join and stay in the workforce. A new report from Community Catalyst spotlights. States that have expanded Medicaid have seen a greater increase in labor force participation among people with incomes below 138% of the poverty line. They've seen a greater increase than states like Alabama that have not expanded. And I think that's really relevant considering some of the conversations that we had recently about our governor, right? Governor Kay Ivey said that people needed to get off their fannies and join the workforce. Well, here's more evidence that Medicaid expansion can help people join and stay in the workforce. You know, policymakers' refusal to expand Medicaid has left nearly 300,000 Alabamians in the Medicaid coverage gap, where they earn too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to afford private insurance. You know, the lack of coverage hits people of color in Alabama especially hard. Alabama Rise's Cover Alabama campaign director, Debbie Smith, said every Alabamian should be able to get the medical care they need to survive and thrive. Removing financial barriers to health care would make our workforce more robust and more productive. It's time for Alabama policymakers to close the health coverage gap and invest in a healthier future for our state and for our people. Alabama is one of only 10 states where workers cannot access quality, affordable health care due to limited Medicaid coverage. Almost half of Alabama residents in the coverage gap are people of color, and 60% live below the poverty line. And I think that's worth teasing out, right? The racism and oppression in this state and in this country. We talked, with Blair Kelly earlier this morning about the black working class, and almost half of Alabama residents in the coverage gap are people of color. Almost half of Alabama residents are not people of color, right? So that's a big disparity. Nearly half of Alabama workers do not get employer-sponsored health insurance, the new report from Catalyst found. And that really is big. Nearly half of Alabama workers do not get employer-sponsored health insurance. And there used to be a time where fully paid employer health care was a standard in this country, right? There are folks who remember that, folks who experienced that. And here we are in the state of Alabama in 2023, nearly half of workers do not get health care through their job. So that forces tens of thousands of Alabama families to make tough decisions, either to forego needed health care or take on thousands of dollars in medical debt. When Alabamians are delaying the care and treatment they need, that hurts their productivity and their well-being. And the need for expansion is especially urgent right now as state officials unwind COVID-19 pandemic-era Medicaid policies, which is leaving about 61,000 Alabamians at risk of losing their Medicaid. Without Medicaid expansion in the state, many more individuals and families will be left with no options for affordable health coverage. Closing Alabama's coverage gap could create an average of 20,083 new jobs per year and have an estimated positive economic impact of $11.36 billion over the next 6 years. All right, 20,000 jobs. How many economic development projects do we see politicians brag about that can even compare with those numbers? Over $11 billion in 6 years in economic impact? I mean, that is a huge stimulus. And Medicaid expansion would be one key solution to improving workforce participation rate across the state, which, again, the governor has made a big deal about, big business has made a big deal about. A lot of the bosses and politicians are talking about workforce participation rate, right? They claim nobody wants to work anymore. They claim they're having trouble finding workers. Okay, well, as we've talked about on this show before, and we'll continue to talk about on this show, folks have to be healthy. All right, folks who have illnesses, who have disabilities, who have needs for medication, needs for regular treatment by doctors, right? They need that. And there are some folks who are unable to participate in the workforce fully because of lack of health care. And because the Medicaid restrictions are so severe in Alabama, you basically can't work and receive Medicaid. So it puts people in a real bind. Healthcare in America is a racket. It's far too expensive for far too many people. But here is one policy solution that is so mild, so modest, so moderate, so easy to do, where we could help about 300,000 of our neighbors here in this state. So I wanted to point out that study because it really, connects with the rhetoric we've seen about labor participation. And this comes about a month after another study, this one issued by the nonprofit think tank, the Milken Institute. And this one determined Alabama has the highest rate of mothers dying from pregnancy-related issues in the country. From Walisha Morris's AO.com article, Milken Institute's Associate Director of Health Economics, Dr. Catherine Sachs, one of the report's authors, said from 2018 to 2021, 150 Alabama mothers died. It's important for people to know Alabama is really the heart of the crisis, Sachs said. So it starts at home. People really need to start thinking about proven policies to improve these statistics and work on making them happen in Alabama. Alabama's infant mortality rate is also one of the highest in the United States. She said states that haven't expanded Medicaid tend to have higher rates. Alabama is one of 10 states that hasn't expanded Medicaid, which would provide care for more mothers during and after pregnancy. So here's yet more evidence of the abysmal state of healthcare in Alabama, a state that is supposedly governed by pro-life family values. Yet more evidence of how Medicaid expansion can save lives, improve lives, save hospitals, increase workforce participation, create jobs, save cost, and produce a massive economic impact that far outweighs the average economic development project that politicians love to brag about. Our politicians love to bribe companies to locate in Alabama, with the promise of hostility to unions, low wages, lax regulations, and generous subsidies and incentives. And the politicians love to then brag to us about what a great thing that is. It's all fantastic news, and we're all supposed to be excited about it because of the job creation. Well, Medicaid expansion would create 20,000 jobs in Alabama, and that's across the state, from the shoals to the wiregrass, from the beaches of Baldwin County to the mountains of DeKalb County. So for those reasons and many more, I've been pushing our labor movement in Alabama to take a stronger stance on behalf of the 300,000 working-class Alabamians who stand to gain directly from Medicaid expansion, and on behalf of the entire Alabama working class that would benefit from the healthier, more prosperous Alabama that Medicaid expansion would bring. In July, I brought a resolution to my local union, IATSE 900, which was adopted by the general membership. We formally endorsed Medicaid expansion, joined the Cover Alabama Coalition, called upon our elected officials to take action, and called upon other unions to follow our lead. In August, I came to the North Alabama Labor Council seeking similar support, and I'm proud to report the council has joined the Cover Alabama Coalition and the fight to expand Medicaid in this state. In response to the IATSE 900 resolution, which I mailed to Governor Ivey, she did write me back yesterday. She says she's giving it, quote, serious consideration, but that she's concerned about how to pay for it long term. I certainly hope that the governor is giving it serious consideration, given how many years we've been fighting this fight, given how many of our neighbors have suffered and even died as a result of Alabama's inaction. And on the topic of cost, it's worth mentioning that this has been studied extensively. Between the generous but time-sensitive extra federal dollars available, the cost savings it would bring in various other areas of the budget, and the significant revenue from its economic impact, there's every reason to believe that Medicaid expansion will more than pay for itself in the long term. That's not just me. That's our state universities, that's the economists, the experts who've done the math and studied this issue, and the evidence is overwhelming that Alabama can easily afford this long term. And that's before we even get into the budget priorities and the fact that we never ask how we'll pay long term for the massive transfers of wealth to corporations. There's pork spending that could be redirected, and of course there's always plenty of ways we could raise revenue in this state. Though again, according to all the facts we have available, it won't even be needed for Medicaid expansion. If anything, we can't afford not to do it. So I'm really proud to see my union, IATSE 900, as well as my CLC, the North Alabama Labor Council, join this fight, a fight that disproportionately impacts the working poor of this state. The cooks, the cashiers, barbers, drivers, mechanics, stagehands, and hundreds of thousands of working class folks who just make too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to get the real insurance they need. Obviously, most of our union members are not directly impacted, as most have employer health care negotiated in their union contracts. But as we've talked about today, the labor movement has always sought to raise the standard for all working people. This is such a no-brainer policy solution that will bring us a little bit closer to a better Alabama for all. And I believe it's important that the labor movement add our voices to the chorus of voices demanding Medicaid expansion. The more voices we add, the louder we are. And it's going to take more and more public pressure, more and more people power and citizen engagement to push Alabama's leaders to do the right thing. We can't sit back and hope they do it. We know how that goes. We have to keep fighting. So I encourage everyone listening, take a minute, participate in Cover Alabama's week of action that they're running right now. You can take 60 seconds, contact your elected officials, take a few more seconds to share the post on your social media. Take a few minutes to have conversations with family, friends, neighbors, or coworkers about this issue and get them engaged in this fight. And you can speak at your next union meeting about this issue and encourage your union to join us in the Cover Alabama Coalition. I'm happy to help you with that, so hit me up if you want resources or sample language or just want to talk about it. But I really just encourage everyone who is listening, who is in Alabama, follow Cover Alabama, get involved in this. I'm hearing that we are closer than ever to securing something. We'll see, The governor said serious consideration, so we need to definitely ramp up our voices and make sure we're heard.
Yeah. Thanks for that update, Adam, and from your mouth to God's ears, we'll get Medicaid expansion in this legislative session, or something quite close to it. So let's go ahead and bring on our next guest, Sean Orr. Sean Orr is a UPS Teamster and co-chair of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. He joins us live now. Sean, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I really appreciate it.
Hey, brother. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. So, by now, we know, everybody knows that's listening, presumably, that the UPS contract has been ratified, and it was ratified genuinely overwhelmingly by the membership. More people voted on this than have ever voted in a UPS contract referendum, and more people voted in favor of it than have ever voted in favor of a UPS contract. So this is genuinely historic support for a contract at UPS. But you know, I mean, the reason for that is that it's a pretty damn good contract, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this contract really is the product of at least a 5-year long fight at UPS. I mean, almost all of the things that we saw get resolved in this deal are things that we, us rank and file activists and militants on the job, have been fighting for since this last contract was imposed on us in 2018. So, you know, really, it's a contract that we can own. You know, the good, bad, and the indifferent. Those are all things that, at the end of the day, it's in there. We got this much because we put up a real big fight at UPS. We built a movement. We involved as many of our coworkers as possible, and I think that we really moved the ball down the field. Some of the things are stuff that we did not expect to win, short of a strike. Yet we did. We got rid of a 2-tier driver classification without a strike. I can't think of the last time any union was able to eliminate a 2-tier system short of a strike. Even with a strike, maybe they make a dent in it. We were able to eliminate that. We were able to get air conditioning in all new vehicles starting in January. I've got coworkers of mine who are package car drivers. They've worked at UPS for 30 years, and they never imagined, they never, believed it was possible that we would get that. Yeah, we did. A lot of these demands, like I said, were things that we imagined would require a strike to get out of a company like UPS. Yet they started caving to our demands at the table, and we got this TA that we did because we were a credible strike threat. They knew that we were serious about walking out and hitting the streets if these demands weren't met. And so, at the end of the day, this is something that I think we can really own and be proud of. And it's a good base to build off of for the fights ahead.
And, a big portion of our conversation is going to be about the fight ahead. What's next? What is the contract enforcement, going to look like? How can people get involved? But just to look in the rearview mirror for another few seconds, you mentioned that this is at least a 5-year fight. There was also a big vote no campaign in 2013, is my understanding, at UPS that was led by TDU. And so a lot of it can even be traced back to then. And even in some cases, you can trace it back to, the 70s and 80s, the formation of the TDU, the implementation of one member, one vote, and all that kind of stuff. But, we don't have to go back quite that far. But can you talk to us about some of the organizing that Teamsters for a Democratic Union has done to bring the Teamsters Union to this point where they were able to launch a credible strike threat?
Yeah, I think, depends on where we want to get started with things, but I do think that, TDU played a very pivotal role in getting this contract across. Teamsters for a Democratic Union, we were formed decades ago, and really like our base as a reform group was mostly in freight and some other industries. But as the Teamsters have changed, so have TDU. There's a lot of us who are involved in TDU that work at UPS now, and that's really, kind of goes back to the 90s and the big contract fight and the strike that happened in 1997 under President Ron Kerry. But this kind of current moment, it's like you said, there was 2018, that contract fight, 2013 contract. You even go previous to that to 2008, and at every single moment, that contract fight sort of served as a catalyst for a bigger movement and a bigger change in our union in a subsequent period. So let's take 2013 for example, where TDU led a vote no movement on the UPS contract. We were part of a big movement of workers, a growing movement of workers that were tired of concessions at UPS under Hoffa. And while the contract was ultimately ratified, there was a big fight. It was a lot closer than the leadership would have liked, and it signaled that there was a lot of discontent among the ranks. And you hop forward a couple of years to the international election in our union in 2016. And again, people did not think that there was that big of an appetite for change. At the international convention of our union the year prior, there's only a handful of delegates that supported the reform slate that was pulled together by TDU. Yet that slate in the 2016 election for the entire International Brotherhood of Teamsters came within a few thousand votes of winning the whole damn thing. That was a huge marker. And that was taking the energy, the rank and file militancy out of 2013 and using that as sort of a driving force out of UPS and into the entire union to change our union, to make it more democratic, more militant, more beholden to the membership. And the body that made that happen was TDU. It was TDU activists at UPS and in the broader union that built out that movement. Now, that similar formula happened in 2018. That contract fight, Hoffa, our own union, proposed a two-tier wage system for package car drivers. They didn't want part-timers to make up to $15 an hour until by the end of the contract. A bunch of stuff that we shouldn't have agreed to. There was a big vote no movement, again, organized by TDU. And this time the vote no movement won. We voted that contract down. But because of a constitutional loophole that was never utilized before, Hoffa imposed that contract upon the membership. And that imposition really kind of marked the end of his career running the IBT. And it was that momentum and that militancy that then was the driving force 3 years later for the 2021 international election in our union, where we did see change take over at the top of the union with the O'Brien-Zuckerman slate, the Teamsters United slate that TDU is a part of. And that's how we kind of got to the moment we're in today. Everything kind of built off of each other. The rank and file militancy in a specific shop, then feeding a broader militancy and a broader desire for union democracy in our entire international union.
What was it that you think created that appetite among the membership for greater democracy, change, militancy, created the appetite that would cause them to vote for a reform slate to lead the international union and to vote down a contract in 2018?
I think that, there's a lot of factors that led into that. At UPS specifically, just talking about that specific situation, a lot of the high seniority workers there, they were 97 strike vets. They went through the 1997 strike. They knew what it was like to go all in to win as much as you can against an employer like UPS. We won a great deal. And we saw every subsequent contract after that, more be given back to the company, more concessions from the union. But you don't lose that militant spark. Once workers get a taste for that kind of a fight, you don't forget it. You learn those lessons from that, and that stays with you. So there was always that sort of, people on the shop floor knew that things did not have to go this way. Yet it was sort of it took a while to build that sort of consensus among the ranks that, we don't have to accept this. We don't have to settle for less. We can change things. I think that, the 2018 fight really was a big catalyst for that. And seeing what it was like to work under, a contract that was imposed on us, with this 22-4 driver classification, with a number of other things that we just didn't want to agree to. That's, it's a 5-year contract. That's a long time to sit with something that you're unwilling to accept. And I think, obviously, you get into on top of that, you get the situation with COVID and the pandemic, and realizing that we are these essential workers that allow through our labor for UPS to make almost $100 billion in revenue last year, over 13 billion of that in profit. This isn't a company that can plead poverty. This isn't a company that can say, the competition's coming for us. We're going for broke. UPS is as much an institution inside the U.S. economy as the railroads are. It's not going anywhere. It's got this incredible amount of institutional strength and this kind of key chokehold in the U.S. economy. And we know that, we work in it. I think that realizing that we didn't have to accept this anymore, we don't have to settle for less, and realizing our true worth, I think that all of that really did feed into this moment. And you bring into that the memories of 1997, knowing that we can fight this company, knowing that we can get more out of it than we had been. And all of that really built on top of each other, I think.
So the contract is ratified now. Like I said, overwhelmingly, really just a huge amount of support from the members. And so, Sean, that means that, everybody can just kind of like disengage, stop going to union meetings, go to brunch for the next 5 years, and, just let loose, right?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what that means. No, absolutely not. No, we've got...
Come on, Sean.
I know. I would love to. I would love to take some time off. But, a contract fight is never an end-all game. There's always more that needs to be done. There's always more that's left on the table. There's always things that need to be built upon. And we definitely got some more initiative than we had previously. I think workers on the job really took the initiative in this contract fight. We defined the terms of what what our union was going to be advocating at the table, and we defined the terms of what the company had to accept if they wanted to avoid a strike. Now, that's not fixed. That's not a fixed position, right? Like, on the shop floor, somebody's always got the initiative. It's either us workers or it's the company. And if we're resting on our laurels, think, wow, man, we got this. Like King of the Hill, we won this spot. Guess what? Tomorrow the company's going to knock you out of that. They're going to pivot. They're going to come swinging from a different area. We have to constantly
Sean, now you're telling me that it's possible that UPS would violate a contract that they agreed to?
Yeah, they definitely would, especially one that they didn't want. I think that there's a lot of things that are in this new contract that we're going to. The company's not going to force this contract on us. We're going to force this contract. We always have. And we're going to have to do that every single day for the next 5 years. Militant contract enforcement on the job. That's what myself and thousands of other rank and file militants are going to be focusing on these next 5 years. Militant enforcement of this contract.
Yeah, what does that look like exactly day to day? What are you going to be doing, and what should members across the country be doing to make sure that UPS does follow the contract? Because even though it would be great to live in a world where everybody was a good faith actor, and that when companies agreed to a contract, they wouldn't violate the contract and do everything that they can to undercut workers. But that's not the world that we live in, and we know that companies will do that. So what are you going to be doing, and what should UPS Teamsters across the country be doing to make sure that that all of the gains that were won in this contract are actually realized by the workers?
So I think the first thing that everybody's got to do, all the militants got to do, and all the activists on the job have to do, is they have to go over what we won in this contract with as many of their coworkers as possible. Walk through it line by line, especially the things that, not the dollars and cents, not the wages that we won, but more of the contract language that we won and the contract language that we currently have. Get that out as much as possible and get as many people involved in enforcing that on the job as you possibly can. Because UPS, just like any other workplace, is the exact same thing. A supervisor, they want to do something, right? A manager wants to do something. They know it's against a contract. They look around. They don't see a steward in sight. They're like, well, there's no steward. There's no union here, so I can just kind of do whatever I want. And they'll have supervisors do union work. They'll violate people's seniority. They will violate our safety language in the workplace. They'll violate people's 8-hour requests, their 9-5 requests, whatever that is. And they just think, well, no steward, no union, right? We need to change that culture on the job. We need to demonstrate that the entire membership are the union and that any member can enforce this contract. It doesn't have to be a steward. It doesn't have to be a local officer. It can be any member of this union. And that comes down to making sure that our work's protected, that supervisors are not doing it. It comes down to making sure that everybody who is scheduled to work is working, that the company is not just sending people home. That comes down to enforcing our seniority rights on the job. Seniority prevails in all circumstances. And I think we need to take that phrase and we need to run with it as far as we possibly can. There's a lot of different things that we're going to have here that I think we need to build off of. I mean, for drivers, we got this new changes to our 8-hour request language. With us drivers, we don't get a limit to our overtime outside of the federally mandated DOT hours of 14-hour day. So they can work you up to 14 hours, right? But as drivers, we can put in a request for an 8-hour day where they schedule you just to work for 8 hours. And they violate it all the time. But we got a little bit of stronger language in here now. Language that, in my opinion, means that we can take some work off of our trucks and guarantee that 8-hour day ourselves. Now, all of that stuff is just, words on a piece of paper until it's put into practice. And I think we have to go about setting the standards and setting a new precedent of what is going to be allowed in this contract. Because that's going to give us just, the biggest amount of room possible. And the company's going to go into work expecting, everything to be the same. They're not going to tell their supervisors and their managers, hey, here's all the new changes in the contract, stick to them. They're not going to do that. It's business as usual. They're going to just act like nothing happened. And if they're acting like nothing happened and we act like nothing happened, guess what? Nothing probably happened. This contract didn't really matter. We have to go and we have to put the work in of actually enforcing this on the job and building off of it, because there's a lot more ground to cover than what we just got in this most recent round. And we have to be prepared and positioned to win all that we can over the next 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all great stuff, Sean. Is there anything else that you think is important to talk about regarding the UPS Teamster contract and enforcement in this fight before we move on to our next topic?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would add to that is that, we do have a lot more work to be done at UPS. I think that we've demonstrated something. We learned something this most recent round, which is, we went into this contract fight with a bunch of demands, mostly around pay stuff, right? We want to get rid of a 2-tier wage system. We want all drivers paid the same. We want part-timers to get a big pay increase. We want to get an extra paid holiday or two. It's a lot of pay stuff, right? We went into this expecting, to really hit a wall, right? And probably have to go on strike over it. Yeah, we didn't. The company TA'd a lot of our demands. They TA'd eliminating the 22-4 classification, our 2-tier driver system, day one of this contract. That's kind of crazy. They TA'd the AC and trucks. We got a significant pay increase for part-timers. I think that we learned something. We learned that UPS is willing to pay a lot of money to avert a strike. And those were the demands that we brought to the table. We brought a bunch of demands around money and around getting a bigger slice of the pie. I think that what we need to do next go around is we need to get a bigger slice of the power on the job. We got paid, but the company is going to still be violating our contract. More importantly, they're going to be violating our rights as human beings on the job. They're going to be forcing us to work. They're going to be dictating to us. They're going to be telling us what to do. I think that we need to get more out of the basic assertion of human dignity on the job and asserting it on the spot, not, filing a grievance and waiting for that to get resolved 6 months from now, but contract on the spot enforcement. I think there's a lot that we can build off of toward that. I think we started getting a little taste of it with this contract fight. But that's the questions of human dignity, I think, are going to go on past this. I'm really inspired by what the UAW folks are fighting for. I think, when I heard their demand around 4 days of work with 5 days of pay, I was looking around like, damn, why didn't we think of that? That's awesome.
Yeah.
But, I think there's a lot to be built off of, and this kind of new moment we're coming into with a labor movement is going to serve a lot of inspiration for myself and my coworkers.
Absolutely. Well, that's all great, Sean. I really appreciate that. The other reason that I wanted to talk to you today is that, for those of you who don't know, Sean is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. He is also on DSA's Labor Commission's steering committee. So, not only is Sean quite literally a card-carrying socialist, he puts in work in the organization, right? And as a union radio program, we talk to workers and union members really across the political spectrum. We've had conservative union members and liberal union members, and also, we've had other socialist union members on. And socialists have a really, really, they played a large role in the history of the labor movement. And so, we want to talk to socialists today that are in the labor movement, and socialists absolutely are in the labor movement today. In fact, one of the people on the reform slate that won in the UAW, Region 9, the Region 9 director is a member of DSA, right? Brandon Mancia?
Yeah, 9A, Region 9A of the UAW, yep.
And so, these are people that are in the movement, and so it's important to talk to socialists, I think, and be able to be willing to work with them and be in community with them in the labor movement. And so, Sean, tell us, what does socialism mean to you?
So, for me, socialism is all about workers being able to control our own lives. I think that right now on the job, right? Putting myself in my shoes as a steward, right? My day, every day, going to work, besides working for the company, is representing the members, filing grievances, enforcing our contract, right? And I think any steward will probably, find some truth in this. But the majority of the things that my coworkers come up to me about are not questions of they're not things that I have answers for in the union contract. It's stuff like, hey, I've got an issue with the supervisor because they refuse to look me in the eye. Or, hey, I'm getting a warning letter for my attendance because I wanted to go to a family's wedding. Or it's, you know what? They just constantly load my truck with more and more work. And you know what? I'm tired. I want some time off. I want to go see my family. I don't want to keep doing this job. I want to work, I want to make money, but I also want to live, right? And all of those are things that go beyond what our contract what our contracts can do. But all of those are things that every single working person in this country, in the world, deals with. That level of alienation, that sense that, I'm a human being, but for as long as I'm on the clock, I don't get treated like one. I'm treated like a machine. I'm expected to just work and do this and do that and do what I'm told. I hear all the time I live in a democracy, yet for the time that I'm on the clock, there's no democracy to speak of whatsoever. And I think that basic sense of alienation, that feeling of I just wish I could act and be treated more like a human being for the entirety of my existence, not just for the time when I'm home, when I'm off the clock, when I'm not at work. That's, to me, what being a socialist is all about. It's about taking that truth, that reality that all of us workers face, and building a movement off of it, and trying to build a society that answers that question, right? That basic question of, how can I be a human at all hours of my existence, not just when I'm off the clock. I think that the dream of having workers control over the workplace and over broader society, to me, that's what I want to see in my lifetime, and that's what I think we need to see for ourselves, for our planet, and for future generations.
How did you become a socialist? Were you, something of like a red diaper baby, or was there a
hell
sort
no.
of transition?
No, it was more like experience, I guess. So, I grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up in Milwaukee. Just another industrial city, Rust Belt, that had this big industrial base for a long time, and it was all unionized. And then because it was all unionized, the companies all pulled out. They all moved down south. They all moved to other parts of the world. And the city was kind of left hollowed out. But I came up out of, in that, right? And, growing up in a city where you look around and things, you can tell like things once were pretty good, but they're not anymore. It's like, wow, these are a lot of like nice houses that are around here, but they're all dilapidated. They're falling down. Wow, this was a huge factory. There must have been a lot of people working, but it's totally abandoned now, and it has been for 20 years. Kind of look around and you realize things were better maybe in the past than they are now. And then in a city like Milwaukee, you read about that past, and it's like, oh, there was a huge labor movement in this city that made sure that people had a high standard of living, and that they only worked 8 hours a day, and they had a lot of downtime. That's why we have all these great public parks everywhere, is because people were able to go and spend those time in those parks. Oh wow, look, this city for 50 years was run by the Socialist Party. We had a socialist government in Milwaukee that built those parks, and that built all of these different public recreational facilities where workers and normal people could go and enjoy themselves. Wow, that's incredible. And then you look at where we are now and where things are, and that for me was like pretty radicalizing. But I think really the big push for me came in 2010, 2011 with Scott Walker becoming governor of Wisconsin, and Act 10 being passed in the state budget, which removed collective bargaining rights for public sector workers. Me and a lot of other kids my age, we all went down to our state capitol, where there was a uprising of workers. There was people who occupied the state capitol for weeks. I remember being out there in February, and there was a blizzard, and this is Wisconsin. This is a blizzard in our state capitol, and there is 100,000 people outside of the state capitol trying to make sure that the people who are occupying that capitol don't get hauled out by the police. This was a really incredible moment. And for me, and I think a lot of other Wisconsinites, my generation, it was pretty defining. Coming out of that, you're going to be a socialist for the rest of your life.
How does your, socialism inform your work as a unionist, and then vice versa? How does your identity as a unionist affect your advocacy for socialism?
I think for as a unionist, it keeps me always wanting to push for more, never being willing to settle for less. I think that socialism belongs in the labor movement because it gives us a bit of a North Star. It gives us a direction. It lets us know that we should not and cannot accept the status quo. We need to always be pushing for more coming to us, not just in terms of money, not just in terms of benefits, but in terms of power, in terms of shop floor control. That for me is a missing link, I think, in the labor movement. We need that vision. We need that horizon that we can point to as like, okay, that's where we're going. I think that a lot of union leaders in this country today are fine with the status quo. They're good with it. They like their job. They just want to keep everybody hunky-dory, keep the company open, and keep the workers fine, and keep the pension from collapsing so you can go retire to a beach, right? They don't have any vision beyond that. They don't see themselves as belonging to this broader transformational movement of workers, of working class people for social change. And we need to change that. So I think that socialism brings that to the labor movement, and we need a lot of that right now. In terms of the flip side of that, I think that a lot of the socialist movement for a long time has been really sort of abstract. Like it's just been people's thoughts. It's been like, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Oh, I really liked what happened in this one country on the other side of the world 45 years ago. I'm going to just kind of like focus on that. Socialism became more of a historical society and more of a, like a debate club and an actual thing that was rooted and coming out of working class life. So for me, being a union member, being a shop steward, being a worker, that's the basis of how I enter socialism and how I enter the socialist movement. I think that we need to bring what people are actually going through every day. For me, it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter at all what you as a socialist think of the Constitution of the USSR in 1936, or who was right or wrong in 1960s China or in 1920s Soviet Union. Like that doesn't really matter. I want to know what you think about what's going on with your coworkers at your workplace right now. We need to root our politics in today. We can't get stuck in the past. We need to think about today to plan for the future. And I think that being, in a union, being as a steward, and being, on the shop floor every day, it keeps me rooted. It keeps my politics grounded. And I think that that's going to be a lot better for DSA and for the socialist movement if more socialists feel the same way and do the same.
How does your being a socialist affect your ability to perform your union work? Like how do your fellow union members react to you being a socialist? Does it kind of impede your ability to work with them? Are they hesitant, or do they not care? Or what is that like?
It's a tough thing because I think I might be a little skewed. I mean, I'm in Chicago. This is a pretty militant city. Workers in the city are used to like people being on the left, and I talk about being in DSA all the time with my coworkers. When my coworkers are going through a fight, how I sum it up as a socialist, and they agree with it. We might not call it socialism right then and there, but I think that a lot more of my coworkers are socialists. They just don't realize it yet. So I think that my politics speak to people that I work with and are relatable. It's not a boogie word for most workers of my generation. It is for obviously the older generation of folks. They might get a little skittish around it, but I mean, here in Chicago, there's 6 members of our city council who are DSA members, who are open socialists. Like I've got my coworkers who their alderman is a comrade, and they're like, oh yeah, you're in DSA. Okay, cool. Or, if a coworker is like, oh, you're in DSA, what's that? I'm like, oh yeah, like those guys, AOC. They're like, oh yeah, that's, cool. Like it's not, it's such a different moment than it was even a few years ago, especially since I joined the socialist movement. I mean, things are just, I think that there's a little bit of a sea change in that, and we got to embrace that. I think that if you act like you have something you should be ashamed of, that your identity as a socialist, your politics is something that you should be hesitant about with your coworkers, their response to that is like, well, if he's acting like this is something to be hesitant about, maybe it is something to be hesitant about. People embrace it and treat it like a normal thing. People get that back, whether they agree with it or not. They're like, well, that's acceptable. That's fine.
What would your message be then to those union members? Maybe some of the older members in your local in Chicago, or union members of any age in Alabama who are hesitant about, even being in the same union as a socialist, much less than being an active member or an officer or leader of some kind?
I think my message would just be, whether you agree with what you think a socialist is or not, there's no political group in this country they'll be on the side of workers until the very end, more than socialists. No matter what our fight is, socialists are in that fight and are a part of it. I know that down where you guys are at, there's a lot of DSA chapters who have been involved in the fights with the UMWA, over Warrior Met, with Bessemer, and the Amazon organizing. Socialists are people who believe in solidarity. That's what their politics are. It's solidarity. That you go into any union hall in this country, even in the most red parts of the country, and the word solidarity is going to be in that hall somewhere. It's going to be on some sign. It's going to be on some, picket sign. It's going to be on some banner, right? That's what socialism is. It's solidarity. It's a sense that all of us workers are on the exact same side as each other, and we just stand on each other's side until the very end of this fight. We're in a fight, whether we like it or not. That fight is against the ruling class in this country. It's against the people that run Wall Street, that run these big multinational corporations that want to treat us like machines and like animals and work us till the day we die. We, as socialists, are people that believe that you're a human being. You deserve time off. You deserve to be a free person, to live freely in this country and have a good life, and the only thing that stands in our way is those bastards that call the shots right now. So how about we all get on the same side, whatever you want to call it, but it's solidarity at the end of the day. And it's as much a part of the labor movement. It's as much a home in the labor movement as anything else.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the Alabama DSA chapters and their work supporting the coal miners. They did a fundraiser that raised something like $17,000, I think, for their strike fund. And to my surprise, the leader of the UMWA's southern region spoke at the fundraiser. So, that's kudos to him for being willing to speak to a socialist organization. I imagine it's easy when you're getting a $20,000 check at the end, but but it's still, I appreciated that from him. So Sean, really appreciate you taking the time this morning. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely, comrades. Good to see y'all.
Yep, appreciate you too. All right. So Adam, let's go ahead and open up the phone lines. And while we wait for people to come in, your sisters and brothers in the Stagehands Union have been on the move over the last couple of weeks, and you've got some updates for us.
Yeah, that's right. IATSE has a couple wins I wanted to report. And I say wins, obviously these are very early. So I don't want to be, overly predictive, but it's always good news when workers are organizing. And so that is a win in and of itself, I believe. So first up, I wanted to mention that VFX workers at Marvel Studios have filed for an unprecedented union election, or at least it was unprecedented. But then, right after Marvel Studios VFX workers filed, the VFX workers at Disney filed, right? And so IATSE has two big campaigns happening, Marvel VFX, Disney VFX, and so these are the video effects professionals who are very essential to the entertainment industry. Marvel and Disney, of course, rely on them heavily. A couple of things I wanted to pull out from the press releases from IATSE. So again, this is only the second time in history that the VFX professionals have joined together to demand the same rights and protections as their unionized colleagues throughout the film industry. So Disney and Marvel, it is a history-making event. Most folks in the film industry are unionized, but this subsection here has not been organized yet. So credit to IATSE for doing that work. Just a couple things about the unionizing VFX workers. They're responsible for creating the video effects across the studio's impressive catalog, including the live action adaptations, right? Imagine how many of these workers were involved in some of these movies like Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, some of these that came out recently over the past decade, where there are a ton of video effects. And a super majority, over 80% of the VFX crew members at Walt Disney Pictures signed authorization cards. So, you know, we'll see how long an election takes. It could commence as soon as 2 to 3 weeks. If a majority of these workers vote in favor of unionizing in that election, the studio would be required to begin good faith negotiations for a contract covering these workers as a group. In the words of Mark Patch, who is an IATSE VFX organizer, courageous visual effects workers at Walt Disney Pictures overcame the fear and silence that have kept our community from having a voice on the job for decades. With an overwhelming supermajority of these crews demanding an end to the way VFX has always been done, this is a clear sign that our campaign is not about one studio or corporation. It's about VFX workers across the industry using the tools at our disposal to uplift ourselves and forge a better path forward. So really love that. The unionizing workers are demanding fair compensation for all hours worked, adequate health care, retirement benefits, and more generally, the same rights and protections afforded to their unionized coworkers who are already represented by IATSE. These demands echo the increasingly prevalent calls for improvements across the VFX industry and are corroborated by the VFX worker rate and conditions survey that IATSE published back in March and that we talked to you all about. And so shout out to IATSE, shout out to the visual effects workers at Marvel Studios and at Disney for organizing. You know, it's just been way too long that these folks have been left out, more or less. And so it's historic that they are organizing and fighting for a union, and just really wishing them all the best. And I didn't know if you wanted me to go ahead and talk about the video game news.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
And just so folks know, if you're only listening, phone number is 844-899-TVLR. It's 844-899-8857.
Yeah, so we had some news with IATSE in terms of VFX, but also with the video game industry. Up first was Working Man Interactive Workers. They unite and file for the first game worker union under IATSE's jurisdiction in the United States. So Working Man Interactive is a employer, and the employees there have sought out to unionize with IATSE. It would be IATSE's very first video game worker union. A supermajority of these workers have signed cards indicating their desire to join. The union did file for a representation election earlier, this would be about a week ago. Working Man Interactive is a well-established game studio working with clients like Nickelodeon, Disney, and Nintendo, as well as crafting interactive experiences for museums and community spaces. Despite demonstrable supermajority support amongst the company's workers, management declined to voluntarily recognize their union, so the workers were forced to take their case to the NLRB for a formal election. Real shame there. Never forget that companies have the full authority to voluntarily recognize a union, right? When the workers come together and over half of them sign cards, or in this case, a supermajority sign cards, the employer could do the right thing and save everybody a lot of time and a lot of trouble and a lot of cost and expense. And they could just recognize the union, right? And say, okay, clearly you guys wanted a union, you have a union now, let's sit down and negotiate. They could do that. But this video game studio has chosen not to, unfortunately. Wanted to mention this quote from junior developer Corey Morey. She shared, "As proud as I am about the work we've done over the past few months, I'm far more proud of my coworkers who have come to support the union. I'm so excited to see what the future holds for us now that we have a chance to have our voices heard and respected as equals." Echoing Morey's sentiments, developer Joel Schubert added, "We recognized management had gaps that left us, the employees, particularly vulnerable. This kind of communal support instills hope and confidence for the future, and it's an unrivaled feeling. In uniting under IATSE, the workers at Working Man Interactive hope to address and improve the conditions in their workplaces and set a precedent for others in the gaming industry. Project manager Matthew Vimislik believes the union will bring together the diverse range of disciplines within the industry, stating game production is a cacophony of different jobs and disciplines pitted against each other for smaller and smaller pieces of a big pie. I believe IATSE's experiences representing wide swaths of the entertainment industry gives us the best chance of navigating the various needs of our workers and create a sense of solidarity for artists, programmers, producers, and engineers. The IATSE has been moving decisively to organize video game workers as part of the growing demand for representation across all sectors of the entertainment industry. In June, the union announced its first ever 2023 GameWorkers.org Rates and Conditions Survey, the results of which will be shared in just the next few weeks. And on that note, I actually wanted to mention that since that press release, they have come out with the survey results just this Friday, I believe. And so we can dig into that more next week. But I just wanted to definitely mention that the survey has come out, but that's a really big deal. IATSE getting its first video game workers union.
Yeah.
Again, the election has to happen, and considering the company decided to not voluntarily recognize what was obviously a union, we'll see how they conduct themselves during the election. Hopefully no union busting. We'll see. This is up in New York, for whatever that's worth. Maybe that makes a difference. We'll see. But yeah, really proud of my union for the good work they're doing in the VFX industry and video games. Some pockets of the entertainment industry have been left unorganized, and it's really, really important because all workers deserve a contract. All workers deserve a union. And appreciate my union for fighting for those workers and wishing them all the best and solidarity in their fights ahead.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. We do have a caller on the line. The caller is from a 740 area code.
Sure.
So 740 area code. What is your name and where are you calling from?
My name is David Thompson. I'm calling from Southern Ohio, local 413. I'm a Teamster, 35-year Teamster, 22-year steward.
Dave from Southern Ohio. Appreciate you calling in. What's on your mind?
One point I'd like to make on the expansion of Medicare or Medicaid. I live in the Appalachian region, so you see these corporate hospitals, corporate health systems, if you will. They invade these small communities, and they control your local politics. And that's one of the in the overall scheme, you want health care for people. And I have seen it all my life where people will not go to the doctor because they'll go broke.
Right.
And it's just it's a quick slide downhill from there. Then their health deteriorates. Now they can't work. Now what do we do?
Right.
Well, they disappear from the labor force. But that was the point to Adams. It's really, you got to be vigilant to watch what these healthcare systems do. They will invade your entire community and press their views on the community through the politics and legislation. Just something to be aware of, I think.
Absolutely. Well, and not only that, and that's a big issue. I think, would be a big issue for, a lot of rural areas in Alabama. I think, in a place like Huntsville or Birmingham, there are enough other interests that, the hospital won't be able to completely dominate the politics. But still no doubt they could have
They're hugely influential.
They are very influential. But another thing to think about with the hospitals is, the way they treat their employees generally, and especially in areas where they are the only employer for more or less. The only, real kind of good employer or half decent employer. Organizations, companies, and hospitals can take advantage of that and try to make workers put up with more than maybe they would if they had other options. Right. And so it's, the ideal thing for a hospital to have any public dollars, frankly, state or federal, would be that they have to abide by union neutrality agreements, positive union neutrality agreements, and have strings attached with wage rates and things like this. Right. But unfortunately, we don't have that.
That's part of it. You when I talk to doctors, when the health systems come in, they're rushed. The treatment is rushed.
Yep.
You see that, and that's what you're talking about would help. But it's just like I said. I brought that point up for something to be aware of while you're looking at that. I know Alabama is a lot rural, and those regions, they matter. I live in those same types. Now, Sean Orr, his interview, I like that, and I want to touch on the strategy that got the contract for UPS. Sean O'Brien, he really put together an alliance, and he got with Zuckerman, who had run against Hoffa before. And he got with TDU, and he built those alliances, those common people or common interest. He combined them. And that's what I think made him so strong going into the negotiations. And he stayed focused on the goals. Now, to speak on Teamster Mobilize, I know a lot of people were pushing the no vote. And for them, this is not the end. This is just merely the beginning. Take a good lesson. Look at what Sean O'Brien has done in his career. And you can, those people like Jose, people like Audrey, they're right. They're good. They have valid concerns for their area. But I don't want them to quit. I want to encourage them. They can build on this and take it and become more involved. Create those networks like they have, and mobilize. They can get things that they felt the contract this time didn't address. Time's on their side, and I know. We live in a society where you push button everything, or you slide right, or you slide left. I grew up in the microwave time when you pushed for 30 seconds. It takes time. Things take time. It's an evolution, but you can get there. You can get there, and that's really just all the points that I wanted to bring up. I think you do it. I think you got a good show. I like listening to it.
Really appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And, I agree with, some of the advice and some of your thoughts about the coalition building that Sean O'Brien was able to do. The local near here is actually had the highest percentage in favor of O'Brien, the O'Brien slate, of any local in the country here in North Alabama. I can't remember exactly what the percentage was. I think it was like 96, 98%. It was wild. And, they're not, and this is not, a knock on them, but they're not a TDU local, right?
Right.
Right. So that coalition building was really important. And it's something that Ron Carey, which not to hit, which is, again, not a knock on Ron Carey. It's something that he wasn't able to do in 97. My understanding is that he had a lot of the old guard working against him in 97, right. Whereas, Sean O'Brien was kind of able to marry a lot of folks to push in the right direction, I think.
Well, that's part of technology. Social media gets people on the same page. Everybody gets on message, so to speak. And I think it's a powerful tool. I know, to Jose and Audrey with Teamster Mobilize, they've done a good job. They've got a movement going. That movement can really pick up speed, and just being observant. If you're a rank and filer, be observant in your sort, or if you're driving, with your drivers, address the concerns. Talk to your stewards, understand your rights. That's the biggest thing. Understand your rights in that workplace.
That's exactly right.
But you can take those concerns and build on them. If the concerns pay, of course you build on that. But there's so much other stuff like the air conditioning. The 2 tiers. There's so much that can be addressed that wasn't this time, but we have a good solid foundation, I think, moving forward. And it's just going to take everybody, being involved, gathering information, gathering evidence, filing those grievances, getting interpretations. That's how it's done. It's how it's done.
Yep.
So,
Dave from Southern Ohio, appreciate the call, enjoyed it, and thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We'll see.
We have another caller on the line from a 714 area code. I believe I know who this is. 714 area code. What is your name and where are you calling from?
Good morning. Buenos días to todos. Adam, Jake, buenos días to you. My condolences goes out to the families and the loved ones of Chris Bagley and Tony Rufus and any worker that's lost their lives for doing their job, and these corporations not having the proper protections, whether you're outside or inside. We shouldn't be dying because these corporations and the federal government not giving OSHA the power that it really needs to kind of enforce these corporations to do the right thing. But my condolences go out to them. I want to give a shout out to all my 952 brothers and sisters out there, especially those in Laguna and Anaheim, drivers, part-timers, everybody. You guys got a little following out here, so it's pretty cool to see. And to address that gentleman's point, I've been with UPS for 25 years. My son is barely 14, going on 15. I want to be here for a while. There's a couple more contracts in me to fight for because eventually it should be equal pay for equal work. We shouldn't have these classifications divide us. With we have a pyramid, like you had a guest earlier talking about this hierarchy. We have one in UPS. We got rid of a 2-tier system for drivers. I'm happy. I'm glad. But replacing one with a 2-tier system for part-timers is not good. It's I don't know why we agreed to it. Does UPS eventually want to put all part-timers in progression? If that's the case, okay, what's going to be the starting point at the progression? $25 that go up to $30 by the end of the contract of the next go round. If it is, then let's talk about it. But I wish one day we could have a UPS Teamster kind of summit and really just hammer down, okay, what are we going to do? What are we fighting for? Yes, it's whether you like this contract or not. Everybody knows I was opposed to it, and I'm eating crow right now. I was completely off. I forgot the main point and the primary focus when it comes to organizing. It's organizing on the shop floor, the basic one-on-one conversations. And, we probably didn't have enough engagement in our end, and I'll take responsibility for that, but when it this contract, we have to enforce regardless how we feel about it. You know, I've been walking around the shop floor telling members about their pay, about now we have overtime after the 6 hours to, hey, if you have overtime after the 6th hour, you get it. And if it's not on your paycheck, you let management know. So it's going around having those conversations and to instill empowerment, you know, because you engage to educate, to empower the rank and file. And as in Teamster Mobilize, I'm a rank and file organizer. Yeah, you have to have those conversations. You could rely on social media, but social media, you're not looking the member eye to eye and making the connections or hearing their stories. So you could then in turn tell them, okay, this is why we're doing this. So you connect their struggle with the overall struggle. You know, we can't be content with this contract being ratified. We now have to enforce it, and we have to set the stage. If this what your guest was mentioning earlier, this is something for something better for the future. Okay, let's really start talking about it. Let's end all progression. There's a member out there in North Cal that told me he would love to see a 1 year progression, and every 3 months is basically one progression. So, for example, you go driving, you know, the first 3 months, you know, you're at $25. The next 3 months, you're at $27.50 or whatever it may be, right? Because when you're going in driving, you're learning different routes every day. You don't have a set route, so you're learning on the fly. So, and when you had a guest earlier talking about, you know, those buzzwords, skilled labor, you know, you get those skills because you're jumping on different routes. Same thing for part-time. We should have, if we're going to go down the path of having a progression, okay, no more 4-year progressions. Let a progression be 1 year. Because you're moving from trailer to trailer, you know, loading or when you're in preload, loading 4 different package cars every day because, you know, somebody calls in sick or somebody has a vacation, you know, you go fill in because you're at the bottom of the barrel. So you're learning different loads, you know, resi load compared to a business load, you know, or a load that has a lot of bulk, whatever it may be. You know, you're learning. You're learning all these tools, but you know, we've agreed to these 4-year progressions, which is completely and totally wrong. We need to get rid of them. And for Teamster Mobilize, we're not going anywhere. We're going to still do what we need to do, address the issues that need to be addressed. If that makes us, you know, if whatever comes our way, you know, but we're never going to stop fighting for the work, for the rank and file and for the working class, because what affects them in their shop floor they have other things that affect them outside of it. And it's time to address both those issues, right? It's time for our labor unions to work in collaboration and association with tenant rights organizations, immigrant rights organizations, because those are the issues that affect us. It might not affect somebody in Southern Ohio, but it might affect somebody in Southern Texas or in Southern California that probably has some sort of immigration rights, or that live in these metropolitan areas where the cost of living is so damn high. You know, so we have to attack all those fronts. It's just not attacking the shop floor. That's the priority, yes, but we shouldn't be singular. We should attack the other priorities that affect our membership. So if you're a part-time, you know of a member that's struggling. You know a member that's living paycheck to paycheck, living in a shelter, in some cases being unhoused. So what are we doing to help them? $21, and it's good, but is it going to be able to buy them a room when the cost of living for a 2-bedroom house out here in Anaheim, California is like, I think $2,500, $2,600? So they can't afford, they don't have enough money to rent a room, you know. And then I'm glad we have these combo jobs. I was reading the latest Jacobin article last night at around 11. You know, yes, we create combo jobs, but in the supplements, combos goes by once again these hierarchies. Goes to existing combo first, drivers in my Southwest in my supplement goes to drivers with 15 years seniority, and then last part-timers. The part-timers are at the bottom of the barrel out there in 705 and 710. it's pretty good that they have like a ratio of for part-time to full-time. I think it's 3-to-1. I think it's 3-to-1 for every full-timer to part-timer that goes combo. Why don't we have that in all our supplements? And these supplements too, we have for part-time, we have overtime at 5 hours, overtime at 6 hours. We should put that and codify it in the nationals so everybody benefits. You know, we have to get some of these great languages that these contracts have, these regional contracts, and put them in the national and codify it. You know, because at the end of the day, if we don't take power back from UPS will be glad to pay the quadruple time. You know, I don't know what what it is for 5 times or 6 times. You know what I mean? They don't care. They'll pay it because why? They still have control over you.
Right.
You know, regardless of the 9-5 or overtime, as long as they have control of you, they don't care. And it's time that we take back the control. It's time that we say, you know what? I want to go spend time with my family. I want to see my son play basketball. You know, I want to see my daughter do ballet. I want to turn around this truck and take it back to the hub and let management figure this out. Because my life is precious, you know, but we need to have these discussions eventually down the road. And to all the workers out there, you know, solidarity to everybody. If you're struggling for your rights to be recognized at your respective workplace, I stand with you. There is a thing called Por Vida out here in Anaheim that the workers, you know, had a picket line, you know, had a little corner picket line, and I was like, what? I was, you know, it brought you know, made me feel good. You know, Southern California right now is a hotbed of labor summer. You know, WGA, Unite Here 11, SAG-AFTRA. You know, I'm glad in other little regional picking lines of Amazon out there in Palmdale DAX8. You know, we're you know, it's a good time to be in labor movement, but we have to connect all these struggles. Medieval Times in Buena Park, I want to give them a shout out. They've been holding it down since I think January or February. It's time to connect these struggles. These struggles are not isolated. We're all struggling. These struggles need to come together. Regardless of your Teamster, UAW, longshoremen, regardless, all our struggles are interconnected. The faster we could recognize it, the faster we could get our respect from these corporations and take some of the power back to ourselves because we need it. And thank you, gentlemen, for always having dissenting voices on your show. You know, I'm glad you guys are on. You guys have a little fan base out here in Anaheim. Even my mom likes to see Jake sometimes. She doesn't like the mustache, but she has a little Spanish term for it. But you know, it is what it is. You know, mom can't stop the vibe. You know, but you know what? Gracias for always having me on. No, well, you know, if you understand Mexicans, Mom, they're a little bit vicious, man. They'll grind you into a pulp with all these. Yeah, it's pretty hilarious at times. Trust me, I get the brunt of my mom's vicious tongue at times. So like she said, like they say, no tiene pelo en la lengua. She doesn't have hairs in her tongue, so she lets it rip to me, and I'm like, Mom, I'm 47. I don't, you know, it is what it is. Gentlemen, gracias. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, and all power to the workers.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate the call. I said maybe 2 weeks ago on the show that, you know, my grandmother had a stroke, and one of the first things, like before she could even actually talk again, you know, she was laying down, she was on the hospital bed, and, you know, I was kind of leaning over her, and she touched my face where my mustache was, and I said, "You still don't like my mustache?" And she shook her head no. So she said she likes it a little bit better now that I've trimmed it up and I don't have the curls, but my wife liked the curls better. So I don't know.
Said, you can't win them all.
Can't win them all. So appreciate Jose's call. We're going to keep the lines open for a little bit longer. 844-899-TVLR. Going to be going a little bit longer today because, folks, there's a lot to talk about with the UAW.
That's right.
We can't just not talk about it. We haven't talked about the UAW at all yet, but we can't end the show like that. So So we are going to talk about it. The UAW, obviously, they're in contract negotiations with the big three automakers. Sean Fain is doing weekly updates on the UAW's Facebook and YouTube pages. So those have been fascinating and really enjoyable to watch. He did the most recent one yesterday, and it was my favorite one yet. I really enjoyed it. It seems like every week he's kind of ramping up the rhetoric, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit. I kind of cordoned off all of the, some of the bigger picture rhetorical stuff, cordoned that off to the end. So we're going to first start with how he has characterized, the bargaining approach by the big three automakers.
We gave our economic demands to Ford, GM, and Stellantis over 4 weeks ago because we knew there was a lot to discuss and we were eager to get down to business. The big three have a simple playbook when it comes to bargaining that can be summed up in 3 words: delay, delay, and delay. So a month ago, I sat across from each of the big three CEOs with your national negotiators beside me, and I delivered our demands. I told them that if they expected to drag everything out until the final days of bargaining and then try to settle everything all at once, they were setting themselves up for failure. I've told them repeatedly, September 14th is a deadline, not a reference point.
So there we go. Not very... Not very good news from the big three, unfortunately. It doesn't seem like they're moving. It doesn't, and it's important to note that he gave them the demands 4 weeks ago, right? And these companies, they have millions of dollars, hundreds of lawyers, no doubt, maybe even thousands, working on this for the companies. And there's absolutely no reason that they couldn't have they couldn't be bargaining in better faith. They couldn't, there's no reason that they couldn't be doing this. They couldn't be doing this more faster than they are. And let's see and he tells us exactly what happened with GM and Stellantis here in this next clip. Let's play that.
UAW family, I'm sad to report that the big three are either not listening or they are not taking us seriously. We are now 14 days out from our contract expiration, and both General Motors and Stellantis have failed to give us any economic counters. There's a pathetic irony to having these companies fixate so much on worker absenteeism and productivity when their top leadership have ditched bargaining and are refusing to buckle down and do the work of actually negotiating a contract.
And that bit that he said about absenteeism is really important, I think, and worth kind of sitting with, because that is something that the big three automakers are trying to hammer in the media. And one of the things that they said was, we've lost $200 million to absenteeism. And Jonah Furman, communications director for the UAW, he pointed out that $200 million is a fraction of 1% of their revenue.
Right.
To absenteeism.
Right.
So, there's...
And also, we have had a pandemic.
Yeah.
There is a, there is a statistical impact of COVID-19 on your absenteeism rates. I imagine they're not the only employer that has seen higher than average absenteeism. What are they doing to help that?
Exactly. I didn't even think about that, but that's exactly right. The last contracts were negotiated in 2019. So this contract has been 3/4 of it under COVID. So of course you're going to have higher than average rates of, absent employees. But one of the reasons, another reason on top of that is because the majority now of big three UAW members are in the second tier. So there are a lot of employees that are only making $16 an hour, no pension, not good health care, right? So your job is not as good as the big three UAW jobs have been in the past, and if your job is really comparable to several other employers in your area, you're obviously not going to be as incentivized to do your best at that job, to give more of yourself to that job. And what do we call that when there's a demand and a supply? What is it that people call that?
Something about a market.
A market, huh? But that's weird because they are complaining about the results of the market. But aren't these people, are the CEOs of the big three are presumably not socialists, right?
No. In fact, quite the opposite.
Okay, that's strange. That's a strange thing to be complaining about the market.
Yeah.
But
and I gotta say, just an example that really comes to my mind is the same situation in the school system here in Huntsville with the privatized support staff. They would always complain that they couldn't find enough custodians and cafeteria workers and security guards and all these other personnel that have been outsourced to temp agencies. And it was, this like constant crisis of the absenteeism and the temp agency not sending enough people, or the people they send don't show up, or they don't come back, or you get what you pay for sometimes. And when employers are treating employees like a second tier, well, some employees are going to treat the employer like a second tier employer, right? I mean, that's just common sense. So yeah, there's a lot of factors there, but I mean, I think you're hitting on something there, and I think you do have to factor in the pandemic as a big reason why you would see some absenteeism issues. But to Jonah's point, how big of an issue is this really? Right. How big of an issue is this really? And it's just to me totally shameless to go weeks without even coming up with a counter proposal, and then to gripe and moan about absenteeism.
Yeah, absolutely. 4 weeks, millions of dollars, hundreds of lawyers on this team, and they couldn't come up with a counter proposal for GM and Stellantis.
Were they
Ford
absent?
come up.
Were they absent? Like, were they being absent from their job?
Ford came up with a counter proposal, so it's not literally impossible, obviously, because one of the big three did it. We're going to talk about Ford's proposal here in a second. But so this is his response. This is Shawn Fain's response to a lack of a proposal from GM and Stellantis.
GM and Stellantis' willful refusal to bargain in good faith is not only insulting and counterproductive, it's also illegal. That's why today our union filed unfair labor practice charges, or ULPs, against both GM and Stellantis with the National Labor Relations Board. Unfortunately, many employers across the country are willing to break the law and incur the meager fines and penalties that result as just the cost of union busting. While it's important we always defend our rights and seek assistance from the Labor Board in holding companies like GM and Stellantis accountable, at the end of the day, our strongest line of defense is each other and our ability to take collective action. That's why it's so important that locals across the country continue to organize rallies, practice pickets, and other actions. We need to speak out together with one voice against GM and Stellantis' illegal refusal to bargain in good faith, and we need to be ready to go on strike if necessary.
So that is, I mean, pitch perfect. The willingness to use every tool available to you to discipline these companies for their, bad faith and illegal bargaining practices, but also recognizing, right, and educating their your members, the UAW members that he's speaking to, educating them about the fact that the government is not going to be the ultimate answer here. Because a lot of people will leave it at that. They will say, oh, it's illegal for a company to bargain in bad faith. It is illegal for a company to fire somebody for union organizing, right? And then they'll just leave it at that. without explaining to these worker organizers or to their members that the law doesn't mean just a whole lot when the penalties are so little. So the real protection that you're going to have to build to actually protect yourself is worker power, is the ability to withhold your labor, to collectively stand up and fight for each other. It's not the government. But when the government gives us tools, we're going to use them to beat the companies over the head with. And so, I think that's a really a pitch perfect message there regarding, using the government. And you can imagine that the companies Stellantis and GM were not happy about that. Stellantis said in a statement that they were, quote, shocked by the UAW claims that we have not bargained in good faith. This is a claim with no basis in fact. Stellantis also said it was disappointed that Fain, quote, is more focused on filing frivolous legal charges than on actual bargaining, which is obviously not true, because who is it that has been at the bargaining table day and night? It's been the union members. While Stellantis's COO, the guy who put that statement out, is the guy that's been in Mexico, right? For the last 2 weeks, okay? So, I mean, really in a certain sense, the cojones on this guy is crazy because, that's just such a obviously bad faith statement. GM put out something similar. We heard from Gerald Johnson last week, the vice president of manufacturing and global manufacturing and sustainability or whatever. He said that the company strongly refuted the unfair labor charge. Quote, we believe it has no merit and is an insult to the bargaining committees. Oh, well, if it's an insult, then that's terrible. We have been hyper-focused on negotiating directly and in good faith with the UAW and are making progress. Well, not reflected in what's written on paper, which is all that matters in contract negotiations. So that's where we are with GM and Stellantis. They have not offered a counter proposal to the UAW's demands, and the UAW has filed an unfair labor practice, as they should. Ford, however, did actually, they delivered a counter proposal. Whether it's in good faith or not is, that's another question, but there is something on paper that they're presenting. And so before we let Sean talk about what's in the proposal, just like he did in his presentation, it's worth remembering the state of the Ford Motor Company. Let's play that clip.
Just as a reminder, we are living in a golden era for the Big Three. Ford's revenue and profits are surging. Ford made over $10.4 billion in profits in 2022 and is on track to surpass that in 2023. Those are profits created by our hands, our dedication, and our sacrifice. And those profits have resulted in unparalleled gains for company executives and rich shareholders. In fact, Ford CEO Jim Farley has said that Ford is entering, quote, the most promising period for growth in Ford's history.
Nearly tripling second quarter profits. I mean, that is astronomical. A golden era for the Ford Motor Company here, according to its CEO, right? And so that's the context that you need to take into reading Ford's counterproposal. Let's start with what Ford is proposing with regard to temporary employees.
And this race to the bottom has been driven in part by the reliance on an army of permatemps. These are workers who often work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, for months on end, with no commitment from the company to their future. That's why we have demanded an end to the use of permatemps with strong language that would require all temporary workers to be given the opportunity to convert to full-time seniority employment after 90 days. We've also demanded that temps be paid at not less than 85% the top rate, that they receive profit-sharing checks, that they be provided full health care and retirement benefits. Rather than agreeing to our common sense demand of equal pay for equal work, Ford has proposed that there be no cap on the use of temporary workers. The company has proposed that they receive less than 60% of the top wage rate, that they be denied a fair share of the profits that their labor produces, and they be given second-tier health care and no retirement benefits. Worse still, under Ford's proposal, the company would have the right to transition to an entirely temporary workforce over time, and we would have no say in this. So let me say that again. The company is proposing the unilateral right to hire as many temps as they want and keep everyone working as temps permanently with no end in sight. UAW family, that ain't happening.
So there you go. He is obviously not happy with Ford's proposal on temporary employees, as he shouldn't be. I mean, the call to end 2 tiers of employment has been a really, really central demand for the UAW this round of negotiations, and the idea that you're not going to be moving on that at all is wild. Or the status of temporary employees. I'm sorry, we're going to be talking about tiers here in just a second. But yeah, the idea that there's not going to be any movement on that from Ford in this counterproposal is really kind of astonishing. And you would think that they would be better able to read the room and at least try to do something like what UPS did. Because, the UPS didn't give away literally every single thing under the sun. But they were able to work and give the union members enough that they didn't feel like striking over what was left. And that's what these companies are going to have to do to avoid a strike. They're going to have to give the UAW such a good contract that the bargaining committee is going to be able to recommend it to the membership, and the membership is going to have to ratify it. And that is, a contract like this is simply not going to cut it. But let's
come in with concessions.
Right.
I mean, demanding concessions in this economy is just, it's really shameful and insulting.
So here's what he said that Ford proposed on tiers.
As you know, we're also demanding an end to tiers. Right now, a majority of the big 3 workers are second-class workers. So we've put forward a proposal to bring the 8-year wage progression down to 90 days and to restore retiree health care and pensions for all of our workers. Ford has proposed that tiers continue, which means no retiree health care, no pension, and dropping the wage progression from 8 years to 6 years. UAW family, as I travel the country, attending practice pickets and rallies, I've seen a lot of signs, and one of my favorites is, everyone, tier 1. That's what solidarity is all about. We will no longer let the companies divide us, and I know we're united in the fight to end tiers.
So here again, not really much movement on tiers. They're willing to go down from an 8-year progression. That is insane. To a 6-year progression, which is still too high. A 4-year progression is really where you're starting to get into the realm of reality and something approaching reasonableness. 4-year progression is what I had in the federal government. But, 6 years, that's absurd. There's one other thing in the contract that I wanted to highlight from his presentation, then we're going to go through the others, or from the counterproposal. That I wanted to highlight Sean's comments, and then we're going to go through the others more rapid fire. But let's hear what Ford came back with on raises.
That's why we went to Ford and proposed a double-digit wage increase, just like the big 3 CEOs have received over the last 4 years, because we know our members are worth the same and more. We also have a lot to make up for in inflation-adjusted dollars. Our starting pay today is $10 an hour less than it was in 2007, 16 years ago. So we've demanded the reinstatement of cost of living adjustments to protect our future and our families against the relentless tide of inflation. What has Ford proposed? A 9% general wage increase over the life of the contract. Instead of cost of living, they've offered one-time lump sum bonuses. Companies love lump sum bonuses because they keep your base wages low, reducing your lifetime earnings. Ford's wage proposals not only fail to meet our needs, it insults our very worth. You know, we've talked a lot about how the big three CEOs saw their pay increase by 40% over the last 4 years, while our pay only went up by 6%. But company executives aren't the only ones making out like bandits while we fall further and further behind. At the risk of sounding like Jim Cramer on CNBC, I want to show you a chart about Ford's dividends. As you can see here, Ford has been using the profits of our labor produces to increase the dividends they pay out to shareholders. As of today, the company is on track to reward shareholders for all of our hard work by raising their dividend payout by 150% to a whopping $5 billion in 2023. If the shareholders and CEOs are lavishing themselves with the value that we create, then it's our turn for our fair share.
So that bit about the dividends is really, it's amazing that they're willing to do this in a contract negotiation year. You would think that they would have some amount of like discretion. You know, it's like that the test with the marshmallow and the child, right? Where you leave a child in an unsupervised room with a marshmallow, and what do they do with it? You know, this is Ford taking the marshmallow when, if they just tried to exercise even the slightest amount of discretion in this year with respect to giving money to people who don't work, you know, giving money to people because they have money, as a juxtaposition to, you know, their refusal to pay their employees more, you know, it would help them a little bit, right? It would, but they are giving the UAW such a layup, a public relations layup, by increasing dividends this year, while they are trying to make UAW members accept a real wage, rate wage cut.
Right. Don't look over here. Don't look over here at these dividend payments and these CEO pay increases. We're just gonna lowball y'all.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, you'll notice that Sean Fain quoted the percent increase for the general wage increase, but Ford, in its statements, has said that it has given a, quote, generous offer that would provide employees with a 15% guaranteed combined wage increase and lump sums, as well as, they say, improved benefits. And, you know, like he said, lump sums, not good. You don't want lump sums. In fact, the brother from Cortland that I talked to a lot and that I have learned a lot from, Joe Marshall, from the used to work at the Champion paper mill over there. He said that basically how big your signing bonus is, the amount of your signing bonus is inversely proportional to how good the contract is. You know, the bigger the signing bonus, the worse the contract is. So, you know, don't be swayed by those lump sum bonuses. So, here is, and also, you know, so there was some other stuff, right? They wanted to reinstate COLA, you know, cost of living adjustments in the cases where, you know, in case of inflation, and Ford doesn't want to do that. They just want lump sums. Job security, they want, they have this working families protection programs, which I think is a really, really cool idea. They want to increase profit sharing, where Ford is proposing a 21% cut in profit sharing. And the UAW wants to increase work-life balance, reduce the work week, all of this. Ford rejected all quality of life proposals and refused to recognize Juneteenth as a paid holiday, and Ford rejected all increases to retiree pay. So very not good. I just want to delve on this Working Families Protection Program, explain what that is for just a second, because it's very, very cool. And what that would do is require automakers that close a factory to continue paying workers to do community service or other jobs that benefit the local community until and unless product returns to that community. Which is a huge benefit. And friend of the show, Teddy Ostro at the Upsurge, who announced a couple of weeks ago that his podcast is going to be transitioning to cover the UAW struggle. He posted on social media last week that he has been editing for his most recent episode, and he said that one of the things that has gotten to him more than anything else is the degree to which the big three automakers force their employees to pick up and move across the country, uproot their lives, sever connections, all of this for profit. And so this Working Families Protection Program is it comes from real issues that UAW members are facing.
Right. I mean, there's a reason why most UAW members in Alabama are retirees.
Yep.
And no longer actively employed.
Yep. So let's see his reaction to all this.
I know this update's infuriating, and believe me when I say I'm fed up. And one thing I want to tell you is this trash can is overflowing with the bullshit that the big three continue to peddle.
We love a recurring character, folks, and the trash can, I think, is probably going to be making a few more appearances in these live streams. So there we go, rejecting the counter proposal by throwing it in the trash where it belongs, and really disrespectful stuff coming from Ford, coming to the table asking for concessions in what the CEO says is a golden era for the company. Really wild stuff. And totally contrary to a couple of people in our comments section last week who were saying that the auto companies don't have the money for any of this and that they don't even make any money anymore, which is a fascinating thing to believe, have to be totally disconnected from reality. But yeah, so that's where things stand right now. And I told you that I had a couple of clips that I really, really vibed with. And those are clips where he generalizes the struggle that UAW members are going through right now with the big three automakers, and talks about how, this is a fight for themselves, yes, obviously, but also a fight for the American working class and these bigger issues that we talk about during elections, thinking that voting red or blue or Democrat or Republican or green, or Green Party is going to fix these issues, right? And they're really, in most cases, not. The way that you're going to fix these issues is through collective organization, is through unionization, is through bringing your companies to heel with the power of your labor. That's the most powerful weapon you have, not your vote, unfortunately. And so he talks about this, and he talks to us about the bigger picture. Let's play this clip.
Like I've said many times, we are one of the most overworked populations in the world. The average worker in Germany works 3 months less a year than the average worker in the United States. What that shows us is that forcing workers to live paycheck to paycheck while working 7 days a week for every week of the year, it's a social choice, not a necessity. I heard this saying once that every billionaire is a policy failure. Truer words have never been spoken. Billionaires, in my opinion, don't have a right to exist. The very existence of billionaires shows us that we have an economy that is working for the benefit of the few and not the many. I say the same's true for poverty wages and long hours. We need to wipe them out. The labor movement once fought for a vision of work life in which everyone had 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for recreation. Sadly, it feels like we've gone so far backwards that we have to fight just to have the 40-hour work week back. Why is that? So another asshole can make enough money to shoot himself to the moon? We need to get back fighting for a vision of society in which everyone earns family-sustaining wages and everyone has enough free time to enjoy their lives and see their kids grow up and their parents grow old.
So there you go. Connecting these struggles to these bigger societal issues. Nelson Lichtenstein on Twitter, prominent labor historian, said that, in a lot of these areas, he sounded something like Bernie Sanders, but a lot better because he's actually got, he's got people behind him, and he's going to be able to bring, the big three, the production of the big three automakers to a halt, where, the most that Bernie could do in any given situation is maybe bring out some votes or something like that, or support people who are doing this. But, rhetoric from a union president like that is something with a lot more teeth behind it than rhetoric like that from a politician. And so very, very powerful stuff, and absolutely true. Because we saw the last time in American history where inequality was this bad, we look back at that period uncontroversially as bad for the vast majority of Americans, of the vast majority of the world, because of the income inequality, because of the power that was concentrated by virtue of the income and wealth inequality, the power that was concentrated in the hands of a few people, and how cancerous and corrosive that was for society. And so I think it's very, very powerful for a union president to be calling that out and to be calling for, the abolition of billionaires, which does not mean, a violent that in a violent way, just that they shouldn't have that money, and then if they don't have that money anymore, they're not billionaires.
Right. No one is entitled to $1 billion. No one is entitled to that.
Right. There was another clip that I pulled on on the bigger picture. Let's play that.
Our fight is not just for ourselves, but for every worker who is being undervalued, for every retiree who's given their all and feels forgotten, and for every future worker who deserves a fair chance at a prosperous life. That's why the public overwhelmingly supports us now. Like I mentioned earlier, 75% of the public supports us in our fight against the big three. That's because we're all fed up of living in a world that values profits over people. We're all fed up with seeing the rich get richer while the rest of us continue to just scrape by. We're all fed up with corporate greed. And together, we're going to fight like hell to change it.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate everything he was saying there and talking the language of class struggle. Yeah, I really appreciate that, because it's long past due that our leaders in the labor movement acknowledge reality and speak truthfully about the conditions that we're facing. Because to do otherwise is a disservice, I think, to the membership. And it's not about being negative,
Right.
It's not about anything like that. It's about truthfully acknowledging the conditions and the reality in which we're living and the reality in which we all experience. We can see it with our own eyes. Nothing he said is untrue.
Right.
And so I appreciate him speaking to the broader working class. I hope the broader working class hears this message. And I think, it's important to get this message out to as many working class people as possible. That the more we can join together, the stronger we are, and the greater the chance we can do something to change all this. Because this isn't acceptable. We don't have to live this way. It doesn't have to be this way, where a few wealthy, powerful elites dominate and control society and our economy. We can do better as a country, as a species. We can do better. But it's going to take everyday working people joining together and uniting across some of our divisions and uniting around our common interests. because we all want to be able to take care of ourselves and our families and have time for ourselves and our families, live a fully productive life, live up to our potential, have a community, a community that takes care of one another. That's what we all want. So I really appreciate, what the UAW is doing. I appreciate their fights to end two tiers, to end the damage that outsourcing has done to so many families across this country. So sending my love and solidarity to the UAW.
Absolutely. We have one more caller on the line called in while we were talking about the UAW, so we'll go ahead and take that caller, and then that'll be it for us today. We went pretty significantly longer than normal, but there was a lot to talk about, and we had a little more time today than maybe we do some other Saturdays. So like I said, we've got a caller on the line. The caller is from a 323 area code, so let's bring them on the air. 323 area code. What is your name?
Hello.
And where are you calling from?
Hello, my name's Joe. I'm calling from Southern Nevada.
Joe from sunny Nevada. What's on your mind?
Just a few things. First of all, I want to shout out the UAW for their continued and public fight with the Big Three. Been a long time coming for them. I also wanted to address a few things out of the UPS contract. The solidarity amongst all workers from the announcement of the end of the contract and all of the, support from every other union that we got, it was really appreciated. And it was felt throughout the entirety of the United States, from Western region to Eastern region. And now seeing the transition go from one very public company to three other very heavily influenced companies in our lives, this is going to be a major and very public thing to experience and view, because it's been a while since we've had a labor movement this strong in the auto industry.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was mostly what I wanted to say, and just say they kind of deserve it. After the regulations that are coming out and the transitions that are bound to happen from ICE to electric and battery technologies and all of this, the major thing for the workers is going to have to be the safety, the wages, and just mostly the protections that they're looking for. Because why are you going to work 70 hours a week for low tier pay when you could just McDonald's or UPS it for, the wage that you feel you deserve?
Yep, exactly right.
And I'm not going to knock UAW workers for wanting more, because obviously they deserve it. Although it seems that the auto industry is dying off, it's still a very important industry for us, because we see Chevy, we see Ford, we see everything every day from our day to day. So it's not, it's not like it's a silent fight. It's gonna be prominent.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was all I
think
really.
A lot of people are seeing it. I think a lot of people are witnessing it, and it is inspiring people to think about their own lives and their own workplaces.
Yep, absolutely. And I don't actually know that the auto industry is dying. Like we've said in our UAW coverage, the Big Three have literally actually never made more profit in their history, in the history of these companies.
It's one of those. I think it's one of those illusion type issues where people say it and it gets discussed and thrown about, and then there's maybe a certain intuition about it, but then we see these profit statements and it's like, whoa, there's life left.
Right, absolutely. Joe from Sunny, Nevada, appreciate your call. Thank you.
Appreciate you for having me on. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today. Appreciate you hanging out with us for an extra long show this weekend. Make sure that you tune in to The Dale Jackson Show Monday morning, 7 to 8 a.m. with your guest
now
host,
you have to.
Jacob Morrison. Yep. Yeah, I have. I've got Joe working on. Dale has this logo of him, like a stylized version of his head, and so I'm having Joe customize it to make it look like me.
Okay. Nice touch.
And we're gonna and when we clip the segments from Monday's show for our YouTube channel, we're gonna have that on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, there you go. All right, folks. For those of you who are in Huntsville, I'll talk to you live on Monday morning. You'll be able to hear that later on in the week. And for everybody else, Adam is going to see you Thursday morning. Do you know what you're going to be talking about on Shop Talk this week?
No, I do not. I've got several ideas that I'm cooking up, and I've reached out to a couple different folks, and so we will see what happens. I've had a couple requests for segments also, and so I've reached out to some people kind of in response to that to see if I can make that happen. So yeah, we'll see. There are a couple of events that I wanted to shout out before we dip out of here. Labor Notes, of course, has some great online trainings. I'm gonna always shout them out because they're there and you should take advantage of them. And if you've never done that, why not? Because you can sharpen your skill set, you can learn, you'll pick something up from it. Even I know the networking's not as great through a Zoom, obviously, but still, you never know who you might run into and might connect with. And so it's really, those are great opportunities. And a couple of the ones they have coming up in September, they do have a live workshop in Atlanta. And online they have dealing with difficult supervisors, what to do when your union breaks your heart, as well as secrets of a successful organizer. So definitely check those out. On September 14th through the 16th, the second annual Huntsville Human Rights Film Festival will take place at UAH campus. And on Saturday, after the show, I'm going to head on over there and check it out. Have a table out, I'm sure, and there's going to be some good conversations about mental health, policing, environmental health, food insecurity. I know Debbie from Cover Alabama will be there to talk about Medicaid expansion, so it should be a good event. And earlier this morning we spoke with historian Blair LM Kelley, and I wanted to shout out a little session she is doing with the Zen Education Project, also friends of the show. Jesse Hagopian is going to be hosting a little class that she is going to teach basically on a people's history of the black working class. So if you want to, dive a little bit deeper, if you were intrigued by the interview this morning, if you're going to go pick up the book, definitely check this out. You can go to the Zen Education Project and you can find that class. It's in there. They have a whole series. They do a class like this every month with different cool historians and writers and activists. And so, I just want to lift that up.
All right. Talk to you next week, folks.
Solidarity, y'all.